afternoon before the Mass. And then this ocean of young people that you were just referencing, the chanting, the singing, the cheering, the applause, but all of it then became remarkably quiet once the Mass started. And it was you could see that these young people were very focused on why they're here, which is to have that encounter with Christ. And I think in his remarks, Cardinal Clemente, the Patriarch of Lisbon, speaking about that idea of a continuous visitation, picking up on the theme of the Blessed Mother, hit on that theme where she went in a hurry, but not anxiously. And I think no one here was anxious yesterday.
That was interesting. That was in the homily, once or twice mentioned, to go with haste, but not with anxiety. Yeah. What do you think he meant by that, and what the Holy Father meant by that as well, Father?
That's a great point, because, our world's constantly pushing us just to frenetic activity. Here, we're on mission. And John Paul II was great at inspiring that mission in young people and calling them to be part of that and giving them a vision of that. And the church is mission, right? She's sent into the world to evangelize, to call people to Christ, to conversion, to faith. So, we have to, as Benedict said, we need a holy restlessness, looking how to serve the Lord, how to do it better, how to do it with more energy. And, I was amazed yesterday, too. I mean, they were out in the sun, the young people, and but we were walking back in the evening, like 9 o'clock at night or something, and they're still, like, going full bore. I mean, they're, like, chanting all this energy. I was like, my gosh, it's impressive.
One of the things that I wanted to do, and I was able to do it yesterday, was once the Mass was done and everything else, I was wandering. And the city is literally filled with young people, but their enthusiasm, but again, that they're not anxious, but there's a joy,
yes,
and an eagerness to be here.
And it's interesting when you say about the silence during the Mass and the reverence, because isn't that what sets it apart? We have the crowds here, we have the flags. So when people say, oh, it's like a party, there's a party element, there's a celebration, there's a joy, but then when it comes down to it in the Mass, there's the reverence, there's the respect, and there's the connection. They're there, right. And they're there for that reason. I remember the late Cardinal George Pell, talking to me about when Pope Benedict XVI went to Sydney, and they had, I think it was 1 million people in Sydney for the final Mass, but he said when the Eucharist was held up, Cardinal Pell said you could hear a pin drop in the crowd. Yeah. And Pope Benedict set that tone, and that's what he wanted for the World Youth Day.
Right, for all of their enthusiasm, the young people here are here with a purpose. And that purpose is, as I was saying, to have that encounter with Christ, which is what John Paul II called for when he established World Youth Day, these international gatherings. But to see young people from literally all over the globe, you've been roaming the city this last week, talking with them. All of them have very similar comments to make about they want Christ to be the center of their lives. They're here to pray, to be with the Holy Father, but also to be with each other.
And yes, Father Mark.
I think that combination, what you're talking about, is exemplified in Mary, that she is the model disciple. She's the first disciple, the first evangelist. She believes the word. You have the Annunciation, let it be done to me according to thy word. And then she goes. That's a 90-mile journey down to Jerusalem in the visitation and over the hill country, right? So there's some ardor to it. She did it with energy. So there's this combination of, yes, it's received. We're receiving it from Christ, from the Eucharist and His grace, but there's a sending, there's a going out that young people exemplify just on a natural level. They have energy, right? They're idealistic, and they want to give themselves to a cause and a purpose. And that's what I think, everyone has a gift to bring to the church. And I think the young people bring that freedom. They're not tied down to a lot of stuff. They don't have anything, right? Yeah. So they're not holding on to them. They're ready to give. And we need to imitate that as we get older.
That's true. Yeah, there was a couple from France yesterday I met in the street, a young, maybe in their early 20s, and I was saying, oh, did you have to take time off? I said, no, we're not working yet, so we can, and we're going to stay for as much as we can. And isn't it interesting when you talk about go with haste but not anxiety? It was so wise when Pope Francis added that on and said, yes, go with haste, but not with anxiety or not in an anxious way. Because you look at the world that we live in now, right, especially through the prism of, let's say, social media, which is a world that young people live in as much as the reality. They live in this virtual reality where everything is speeding up and becoming faster and faster. News consumption, your social media feed is scrolling faster. So the haste is different here, isn't it?
It is, but there's an underlying word here as well, and we see that in this passage relating to the Blessed Mother, and that is trust. That what had just happened to her was truly extraordinary, unprecedented in human history. She trusted in that. But then what did she want to do? She wanted to tell the world about it. So she went to Elizabeth to do this, and she went in haste. So there's this idea of wanting to go out quickly, but in trust, in belief and hope and joy.
And enthusiastically,
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
It's a great challenge for young people today to proclaim their faith, isn't it? I mean, we have done interviews for EWTN News over the past number of years with people like Harrison Butker, the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, other prominent people in the world of media and sport who have a large platform, who have made it to a certain level, who feel confident in speaking out about their faith. But for ordinary, quote-unquote, young people in today's society, it's difficult to stand up for what you believe in sometimes, Father Mark, isn't it?
Well, thankfully we have the Holy Spirit, right? To give us the charisms, the gifts, to build up the body of Christ. And, the Cardinal described this haste yesterday. He said, this haste is different. It is to share what already carries us forward. To share what already is carrying us forward. That to share our experience. I mean, it could be that simple. You might not be a theologian, but young person, I just got back from Portugal. Why did you go? Just share your motivations, your lived experience here. That's a great starting point. And to naturally use, they're all on TikTok or whatever social media thing, to use that,
Because nowadays people use the kind of gotcha methods, and
Right.
I know myself when my friends are saying, but what about this and that in the Catholic faith? I say, well, look, I'm not a biblical scholar or a theologian, but here's what I feel. Here's what I just feel it to be true or right.
Right.
So young people shouldn't be afraid to say, well, look, I may not understand everything about the faith yet, but I feel something inside,
And the happiness that they feel in their lives, and there's a fullness to the Catholic faith. We saw that fullness yesterday here in this field. But you make a very important point that there is this pressure on young people in particular in social media to be secular, to give up their faith, to find fulfillment or what they think is fulfillment in other things. And I think the young people here recognize that this is where they can find true fulfillment. And they have come from vast distances to share in that. But secularism and relativism, we see that here in Portugal, and we can talk a lot more about that today, is a real problem for young people. It's in social media. It's everywhere you look. And that fear of socially being ostracized and even being canceled by modern culture in social media. So there are a lot of pressures.
And isn't it interesting, Matthew and Father Mark, because I know in the past when I've seen young people going on social media, going out on a limb and saying, you know what, I'm a practicing Catholic or I'm a Christian, I believe in this, people deep down actually do admire you. They may not have the courage to go online and support you publicly, but I have so many examples of people going up to someone and say, listen, I agree with what you said, and thank you for saying that. So I think people admire that as well. They really do.
Yeah, we're not going to win every argument. It's kind of, you just don't want to look at it like these polemical arguments to have with people. On social media, a young person might just show, hey, I'm going to Mass this Sunday.
Yes.
I'm getting together with this group. We're going to do whatever good work together, and witness that way. And I think the world's hungering for that kind of community so much, and I think people, because the virtual world, hopefully it can foster, community and things, but it can't replace it, right? The flesh on flesh, face to face gatherings, community that we have, and Catholicism, Christianity is preeminent in that. And we come together to be at Mass, every Sunday, and I just see that all over the place, all age groups, just hungering for that communio of the church.
And what happened yesterday, you couldn't do this virtually, in no VR or anything. It was just incredible having the opening Mass last night here in Eduardo Park. And we'll be live as well, by the way, tomorrow from Eduardo Park again with the opening ceremony with Pope Francis. And in around an hour's time, maybe slightly less than an hour, Pope Francis, the Holy Father, is due to land at Lisbon Airport, just next door to us, and we'll be bringing you that coverage here live on the show. So stick with us, and we have much more to come. But the city we are coming to you from, one of the oldest cities in Europe, centuries old, beautiful Lisbon. Have you had a chance to look around?
I have.
Matthew?
I have.
Taste the beautiful Portuguese wine and see the sights and see the beautiful scenery?
Yeah, this is an ancient city. I mean, this goes all the way back to the Romans and even before that. And there's a beautiful history of the church here. Anyone who's here, you go to the cathedral, you go to the monastery of Jerónimo. But just to wander the streets and to have those encounters with the Portuguese people who have been so welcoming. An army of young people has descended on this city, and yet everyone has a smile.
And the interesting thing is that the city of Portugal, normally the population is only 500,000 people, so 500,000 residents. So for 500,000 now to swell to what could be 1 million, 1.1 or 2 by the end of the week, it is, as you said, they're taking over the city.
And a little factoid, too, is that World Youth Day, the crowds grow in size as it progresses. The masses, the closing Mass for the Holy Father is always the most attended event for obvious reasons. It attracts not just the young people here for World Youth Day, but everyone who wants to see the Holy Father. I think of the 5 million who showed up for John Paul II's Mass in 1995 in Manila. And if this is an indicator of the size of the crowds, we can anticipate an immense ocean of people come Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah, and I think the pilgrims here, they have this incredible opportunity in Lisbon. It's the birthplace of St. Anthony of Padua. You know, Leo XIII said he is the saint of the whole world. And he's so popular. I mean, everybody prays to him for lost objects. You know, he delivers on those promises. But the young people can go to the place, they built a church over the place of his birth in the old town next to the St. George's Castle, and pray. They have first-class relics there, obviously, and the pilgrims are just streaming through there the other day. But I thought, I even caught my attention. I said, wow, we're praying to this saint all the time, and now I'm here in his hometown.
And a doctor of the church.
Yeah, he's a doctor of the church. He's called Doctor of the Gospel. You know, St. Francis called him my bishop, you know, and he's a great scholar, went to Paris to study.
There's a famous story of him preaching to the fish when heretics wouldn't listen to him, and the fish gathered all around him in a lake and listened to him preach, and it convinced the heretics he may be onto something here.
We should pay attention.
Which is appropriate given the heavy focus on fish here. Some of the best dishes you can have in Lisbon are, I think it's bacalhau, the salted cod and other things. So there's a theme here we're seeing.
You know what? You have whet our appetite. We've talked so much about Lisbon. I know people at home watching all over the world, they want to see this great city. And across the week here in EWTN, Father Leo Padalihog, who is from the ministry Plating Grace, and he has a show on EWTN, Savoring Our Faith. So many of your viewers will be used to Father Leo. He has done this wonderful thing. He went to visit many of the towns and cities across Portugal. We'll be showing you that throughout the week. But why not start with the city that we are sitting in now? This is Father Leo and his tour of beautiful Lisbon.
Welcome to one of the oldest cities of Europe, Lisbon. The city of Lisbon has a unique history, one that was originally Christian because it was part of the Roman Empire. But in the 700s, the Muslims took over in a siege, and they were under the Moor control until the 12th century, when Christendom finally reconquered the city of Lisbon and allowed the Catholic faith to flourish, giving rise to not only beautiful churches, but one of the church's greatest saints, Saint Anthony of Padua. But he was actually born in Lisbon. The seat of the Diocese of Lisbon is known as the Cathedral of Saint Mary Major, which was at one point a temple for the Muslims, but when the Catholics conquered it again, they built a beautiful church. And there you see almost a fortress on the facade, which contains inside incredible precious architectural style as well as works of art. With the many side chapels around the main altar, you will actually also see the baptism spot of Saint Anthony of Padua, as well as a relic. And why? Because right across the street from the cathedral, you'll actually see the birthplace of Saint Anthony of Padua, now known as Saint Anthony's Church. When you go into the Church of Saint Anthony, you can go into the crypt and visit the place where Saint Anthony was born. And as you travel through the city itself, you'll experience beautiful landscapes, incredible vistas, but nothing better contains the history of a city than the faith and the churches, including a 16th century church created by the Jesuits and the only church to survive the earthquake in the 17th century. This is a church dedicated to the French beggar named Saint Roch. Saint Roch is an inspiration for many of us because even though he grew up wealthy, he gave to the poor. While he was banished from many cities and left to beg for bread, a dog would often come and bring food to this holy man. This is a reminder for all of us who are pilgrims that we have to pack light on our journey to heaven, and we have to practice charity, and the best way to do that is to be inspired by the faith and the churches and the history of incredible Catholic cities like Lisbon, a place where you can continue to keep savoring your faith. And now back to EWTN's live coverage of World Youth Day 2023 in Portugal.
Thank you very much, Father Leo Padley Hug there from Plating Grace's ministry and Savoring Our Faith as a show here on EWTN. Father Leo is based in Baltimore, and actually, fun fact, he has a food truck where he makes tacos, and he drives around Baltimore and he interacts with people that way, and all different types of people come to the food truck for the good tacos, and he talks to them about his faith as well. They're saying, what, there's a priest serving me tacos? It just shows you there are lots of different ways to evangelize. Right. Isn't that right? Now we want to welcome our new guest to the studio here. How are you? We saw you yesterday, brother.
Doing well. I'm enjoying it here.
How has it been? Is this your first World Youth Day?
This is my first World Youth Day. First time to be in Lisbon and Portugal altogether. It's been an amazing experience.
Brother John Therese, also a Franciscan missionary of the Eternal Word, from based in Alabama.
Yes.
Where are you from originally, brother?
Originally San Antonio, Texas, that area, Bernie.
Nice place. I've been there. Stand down by the Riverwalk, all the restaurants.
Right there, yeah.
Very beautiful. And you're celebrating, this is a very special time for you.
It is.
We have to tell our viewers.
It is.
Because you're celebrating 10 years ordained now.
I made my religious profession
10
today,
years
10
ago.
years. So, and it's been an amazing journey. And quick story, I just remember whenever I was 17, my dad, he wanted to teach me something about the faith. And at the time I was just indifferent and just didn't really get it. And, but I remember he started talking to me about Our Lady and angels. And I just remember listening to him, and just the thought occurred to me, what does any of this have to do with my life? Couldn't make any sense of it. Fast forward, I make my religious profession on the feast day of Our Lady of the Angels in the chapel of Our Lady of the Angels. So I think there's a real spiritual connection there. Today's a special day for all Franciscans, and but it's very special to me too.
But Brother John, when you were growing up, so you're like so many young people, aware of the faith, you come from a Catholic family, was it ever something you saw yourself, I could be a brother, maybe I could be a priest someday, I could have a religious life?
It was hard to see that vision.
Really?
It was very hard.
What was distracting you from that vision?
Probably a lot of things, just sports. Not that those are bad,
yes.
Girls, music, but I think more it was just something I never really thought about, or maybe had a very clear understanding of. But as I've grown and learned about my faith, it's a world of opportunity. It's a life filled with grace. It's been an amazing experience, and I wouldn't trade any of it. I think it's just an awesome vocation.
You're 33 now, so
33.
You were 23 when you became a brother. What was the moment when you thought, as you said, you were growing up into kind of ordinary things, and you would never have pictured yourself in religious life? So was there a singular moment, or was it a build-up to you saying, actually, this is for me?
It was probably a combination of different things, just life experiences, just moving out of state, meeting new people. I can't really just put it on one thing. I think there were many things, and just over time you just start to reflect and things start to be put in order. But even, I just remember even watching, whenever I was in college, watching Father Mark on Life on the Rock, just seeing a friar in a habit.
We're now co-hosts on that.
Now we're now co-hosts. And I thought that was really intriguing. It's like you just don't ever see that. Same with Mother Angelica.
Yeah.
Just seeing, a religious sister, nun, talk to faith on TV.
And we should say today as well, you're going to make a trip to Fatima with the crew to film some spots there. And your grandfather was a big devotee
Oh, yeah,
of
he
Fatima.
was. Yeah.
So this is kind of a beautiful moment.
It is.
for you.
I've never
Yeah.
been to Fatima either.
Yeah.
I'm wanting to go. That's kind of been one of the trips, but I'm really looking forward to it. Just seeing the shrine where Our Lady was and just where the children of Fatima was. They have such an amazing story. I'm hoping to get a lot of interviews out there.
What was your, like yesterday we saw St. Jacinta's place where she was at for a while. What was your thoughts on that?
I think you just see kind of a little person in such great strengths of holiness.
9 years old.
9 years old. And, I'm 33, and if I can ever reach that, I'd be like, wow, But, again, they have such an amazing story, and then they teach us that, holiness isn't impossible. You can be a kid, you can be older, you can be religious or not, and it's possible. It's very doable. And I think, it begins, with having a relation with our Lord and Our Lady. If you don't have that as a Catholic, your faith is going to just crash.
How did you foster that, brother, when you were like in your late teens, your early 20s? How did you foster that relationship, personal relationship that led you then to enter religious life?
Well, one of the things, I started reading more religious books. I think just good Catholic books did a lot for me. But something I always encountered, especially if it was reading like the lives of the saints, was there was a big emphasis on prayer. You have to pray. And at the time in my life, it was like, I never pray on my own. I'll pray with my family. I go to church and all that. But I don't have that real personal connection. That's something very empty in my life. And so that was something I wanted to put into my life, was having that, I think, channel of prayer. And that was very transformative for me. A lot of changes. And I think, there's some struggles maybe at the beginning, but there's a lot of graces built into that. Whenever you make that maybe discipline or commitment to really say, Lord, I want to spend time with you. I think, our Lord responds to that quickly. You don't have to wait very long.
Yeah, the World Youth Day in 1993 was something of a legend today for the number of vocations that were found there, to the priesthood, to the religious life, even the people who met their spouses there. A lot of the young people, if not most, coming here are looking ahead and trying to discern what God wants for them in their life. You've been spending a lot of time with these pilgrims, I know.
Oh, yeah.
What are they telling you, especially comparing it to your own experience?
Well, I think a lot of the youth are so excited to be here, just as I am. And in many respects, I think it's just a great renewal of our faith. I think there's something very powerful when you see the church universal. A lot of times we can be behind the screen, so we don't always see everybody. But it's so amazing to see the faces, the joy, the smiles, the laughter, the singing.
Different countries.
It's a different country, and people want to be here. They want to grow closer to the world, to our Lord. And I think a lot of times our world just kind of will drown that out. But there's such a truth, a richness, a beauty there that people want to, cultivate and be really part of. So.
It's interesting when you were saying that you learned how to pray, have time alone with Jesus and personal prayer. We can take it for granted sometimes, and I'm conscious that people, as you said, when you were channel surfing, coming across Father Mark, I remember growing up in Ireland, looking through the channels, who is this nun on our TV? So different, and you're kind of captivated, and you learn it's Mother Angelica. So I'm conscious even with this broadcast right now, God only knows who is coming across the network for the first time, on social media as well. And I remember when I lived in New York, I had a friend who had a lot of problems with anxiety, and she was trying to get help in different places. And I said, you should pray about it. And I remember the question she asked me. She said, how do you pray?
Yeah.
It was so alien.
Yeah.
How do you pray? If a young person here in the street who isn't at World Youth Day but is in Lisbon and said to you, brother, how would I pray? What would you say to them?
Well, for me, you don't have to do a marathon, you know, or put yourself into like a difficult position trying to pray. It's just pray where you are, you know, make it short and sweet, you know, speak from the heart. And I always think, you know, God responds to prayer. You know, it doesn't have to be just this long litany, so to speak, but just
sincere prayer.
Sincere,
Yeah.
you know, very sincere, humble, you know, and those are just things. But I think there's also just a pattern of habit, continuously doing it, not just once a week, once a month,
Yeah.
you know, but try to make that effort of the daily, just to be mindful, even if you can do it hourly.
I
Goes
think
a long way.
that's a great point. I was just reading an article. They were talking about like fitness and everything, and they were saying, you know, all these techniques, whatever. But they said the most important aspect is consistency.
Yeah.
If you don't give up, you will grow in prayer. You know, and just, you know, we have devotions of the Rosary. You know, obviously the Mass, and just to keep practicing meditation, prayerful reading of the Scripture. Just try different things. Don't give up.
And that, you know, there's been also models of people who set a very good example of prayer. And in my family, my grandfather, my father, you know, they put that before me. And so I've always been able to say, you know, they did it. Those are great examples. I've seen priests, religious, that are just models of prayer. And I should always tell myself, I should be like that. I should be a model of prayer. You know, it's, you know, I'm still working at it. But, you know, I think that's such a beautiful thing whenever we witness that.
And if you're reaching out, which prayer is, to use a text analogy, if you're texting somebody once a year, you're not likely to be anticipating or have a lot of expectations in that relationship. But if you're texting on a very regular basis, it's amazing what you can develop.
It takes discipline, doesn't it? I mean, when I look at my WhatsApp and there's so many unread messages and you say, I've got to prioritize and get back to these people, and it takes work.
It does.
It's not, there's no easy fix. You have to devote time to it and do it.
And I got to say something absolutely shocked me today. We were in the media center, and they have a chapel. They have a reservation of the Blessed Sacrament. They have a tabernacle, the vigil light. We're going to offer Mass there at 3 today. But I remember being in Madrid and just kind of shocked by some of the journalists that they're professional. They just couldn't care. They were completely unimpressed, you know. But now there's this huge growth of Catholic media. You get a lot of individuals here. The media room's big. You got YouTubers, social media people. You got priests. But I thought this is a milestone to have the Eucharist at the media center. That's a move forward.
Well, isn't it funny you mentioned that, because many Catholic journalists here from EWTN, but from all different Catholic outlets on radio, TV and online, but then because of the size and scale of this, all the secular media is here too. Portuguese broadcasters, European and international broadcasters. So the organizers of the media center, it's like a 7-page document about what words mean in the Catholic Church. Explanations: what is a bishop? What is a basilica? What is an archdiocese? How is it different to a diocese? But we have to remind ourselves like that. How do I pray? That for many people, this world is very alien to them. And there was something yesterday that some of the viewers were, someone messaged and was talking about the Eucharist as well. And again, if a young person here, and they say, okay, I understand people are Christian, they believe in God, they believe in a higher power, they believe in Jesus, but the Eucharist, well, you know, for many people who are looking on, they find that hard to understand. They say, why is the Eucharist so central and important to the faith?
You know, we also serve at the Shrine of the Most Blessed Sacrament, Mother Angelica built just north of Birmingham. So we have a lot of Protestants from the area come and visit. You know, they come on their church van, and they pour out of the van, and I might meet them on the piazza or something, and I'm sympathetic. How do you explain an 8-foot-tall monstrance that we go in, you know, we bow before? I mean, when you walk into the shrine, that is what you see, you know. But, you know, it's the most common question I get, it seems like, is how do I pray? And, you know, the disciples in the gospel went to Jesus. They saw him going to the mountain alone to pray. Lord, teach us to pray. You know, he teaches them the Our Father. So it is a hunger. So, you know, seek answers to it. Read about it. But don't give up. The church has a wealth of treasury of prayers, of memorize prayers and ways to pray. It's just a very rich tradition we have.
Yeah.
Well, I have to ask you about, you're talking about the monstrance, so the Eucharistic processions.
Yeah.
Something that a lot of people in culture, we have processions in New York, we have them all over the world, especially with the Eucharist revival now coming up next year. In Indianapolis, we have this magnificent, great gathering of Catholics with all of these processions. What do they ask you? Because this is something that a lot of people have never seen in person.
And even within the church, I mean, we have to, John Paul II, when he wrote about the Eucharist, he wanted to rekindle Eucharistic amazement. Father Angelus used to tell us, read something about the Eucharist every day. We need to blow on those embers. I mean, it's an inestimable mystery. You know, how do you fathom this? It's the gift of God himself. I mean, Jesus is present in the sacraments, but in the Eucharist, it's the presence par excellence, body, blood, soul, and divinity. You know, so we're receiving him, receive that communion, and we're united with one another as well. It builds the body of Christ. It builds the family of God. It's unimaginable. I mean, I think we constantly have to renew that faith. And, you know, as the person that goes to daily mass, you know, they get it. Mm-hmm. I have a friend of mine, he's Protestant, and his wife is Protestant. They're in music ministry. They would play at their churches. They felt like they hadn't worship. They lived next door to a Catholic church. They would go to the Sunday Mass, and I'd ask him, why? I kept asking, why do you go? Why do you go?
Wow.
And Father Joseph explained it to me. Because John 6, he says, no one can come to me unless I draw him. That Jesus is drawing us to himself in the Eucharist. And they couldn't even articulate it, but they were drawn to it.
How do we emphasize to people that is so incredibly important? Because in my home country of Ireland, we look at the history of the Catholic Church. In the 50s and the 60s, it was standing room only in churches. There was often a queue outside the door on a Sunday. If you didn't come early, you didn't get a seat inside the church. I think it was a 90% attendance rate in the 50s and the 60s in the Emerald Isle. Now today, in 2023, that number is much, much, much lower. And this year for St. Patrick's Day for EWTN News in Depth, we went to Ireland, a crew of us. We went all over the country talking to various bishops and members of the Catholic Church. And one bishop, he was talking to me and he said, yes, at the moment with Catholics in Ireland, many people still say, when you look at the census figures, they proclaim to be Catholic, but they see it, as he described it, more as a horizontal Catholicism. So being good to one another, charity, outreach to those in need, whereas in the past it was very vertical. It was worship, it was adoration, that was the emphasis. Whereas nowadays the emphasis is, in Ireland, many young Catholics believe, well, if as long as you're a good person and you do your best and you're kind to people, and of course you need both. How do we emphasize to people that the vertical is just as important as the horizontal?
The horizontal comes from the vertical. I mean, the communion happens in Christ. It doesn't happen outside of him. So we receive him. That's a principal effect that, you know, when we eat food, when we eat bacalao, I'm turning that into my body, right? When I receive the Eucharist, he's transforming me into his mystical body. You know, I would tell people, make a commitment to go to daily Mass for a week and see what happens. It's almost like you have to experience it. You know, you can spend, as John Paul talked about, this loving converse with him. You experience like a strengthening. I had a friend of mine who was taking care of his father for years, a number of years. He couldn't go to daily Mass. When his father passed away, he started going to daily Mass. First thing he told me, he said, I can't believe how much stronger I feel going to that. It's just something you have to experience.
I know even in my life, again, when I thought, you know, none of this makes sense, it's probably because I didn't really understand the Eucharist. And it wasn't until I started learning the teaching on the Eucharist that I began to realize this is very powerful. And that was really a spiritual awakening. I think just somebody just kind of waking me up. Because I remember even in college just reading John 6 for the first time on my own. You know, I probably heard it, but, you know, it's in one ear and out the other. But I just remember Jesus talking, you know, about eating his flesh. And I was like, wow, that's pretty literal.
Well, in that horizontal Catholicism that you were talking about in Ireland, we see in many, many places now. Here in Portugal, which is 80% Catholic, at least according to the census, we have Mass attendance that hovers around 19%. So we're seeing that everywhere. And yet we are also seeing this commitment to the Eucharist, to Masses, where even though attendance may be declining, movements like this, World Youth Day, can have very profound spiritual fruits. And we saw that in '93 in Denver. We're seeing it in the results of all of these World Youth Days, of young people who are going back home filled with that zeal, that love of the Eucharist.
You know, I'm reminded of our coverage of the International Eucharistic Congress from Hungary, and you'll have to remind me of the cardinal's name, an African cardinal you were talking to. There was a great moment where you were talking to him about the Eucharist and about young people, or people in general, being able to fully understand it. And how can we fully understand it?
Yes.
Who Cardinal said to you, what was it he said to you?
I'm trying to remember.
He said, even I sometimes have struggled understanding it,
Yes.
but I believe.
But I believe.
I
Yeah.
have faith, that is the difference. He
Yeah.
said, who am I to understand it and how it, he said, but I believe. And it's sometimes just taking that leap of faith, isn't it?
It's the mystery, but the faith in that mystery.
Yeah, I thought that was a great moment in the coverage.
There's a great quote from the Council of Trent, which used the teachings of Thomas Aquinas. He is the saint of the Eucharist to explain it. And even Trent humbly says, words can hardly express this mystery. You know, it's so profound. It's a mystery. We can't, I think it goes beyond our just human
Or
intelligence.
comprehensive.
Yeah,
We can't comprehend
yeah.
it, but having the faith in it.
And the other factor we should say, like the Pope is going to hear some confessions of young people. I forget what day that is coming up, but they have all these confessionals built. My understanding too was a former prisoner who's
Some of them were made in the prison,
oh, was it?
prisons of Portugal.
Yeah.
The confessionals.
I mean, that is such a great analogy. You know, we're imprisoned by sin, right? This guy is out of prison. Come to confession, get out of the prison of sin and death, you know. And that is just vital to a real Eucharistic life, is because we need to be cleansed of mortal sin, serious sin, before we receive. And those two sacraments go hand in hand. You know, if we practice those, our faith really starts to grow.
Just shifting gears slightly for a moment, because, of course, conscious that people are tuning in all the time. So if you're just tuning in, you're very welcome to the show. We're coming to you live from Lisbon in Portugal. This is EWTN's coverage, day 2 of World Youth Day. We're awaiting the arrival of Pope Francis, who should be touching down in the next 30 minutes or so, flying in from Rome, of course. And we'll bring you that live and in full here on EWTN. So do not go anywhere. And a reminder to your friends all over the world, we're broadcasting as well in Spanish, German, and in Polish as well. But to have it in a city like Lisbon, let's talk for a moment about the logistical coordination, the challenges. It's a huge undertaking, Matthew, for any city, especially a city which is relatively small like Lisbon.
It is. It's a daunting task. And you imagine trying to organize the logistics back in the 90s with the World Youth Day in the Philippines.
Yes.
Where you're anticipating, and it happened, you have 5 million people who show up. How you care for them.
Yes.
So it is an undertaking, but also it's one of those, you have a certain amount of trust. I know you had extensive discussions with now Cardinal-elect Aguiar about how he was helping to prepare all of this and some of the things that went into it. And what was it that he said to you about the preparations leading up to this?
Well, he was very honest, and he said it was like a defibrillator. When I asked him, I said, Your Excellency, how do you feel? We've only a few days to go. And he said, it's like someone is putting a defibrillator and giving me that shock. And as well, when he went to the Vatican and he met the Holy Father, and the Holy Father expressed his hopes and desires for World Youth Day. But it was interesting because of the media. It's a small bit bittersweet for the Catholic Church in Portugal this year, because on the one hand, they're hosting this incredible event, delayed, of course, because of the pandemic. But when you think of everything that has happened in the world since the last World Youth Day,
Right.
Global crisis, economic crisis, war in Ukraine, the global pandemic that no one could have seen coming, and the destruction and the hurt and the sorrow. So on one hand, the Portuguese are so happy to be hosting hundreds of thousands of young people, and on the other hand, you had the first release of a report here about sexual abuse in the Catholic Church in Portugal. And, for the two of them to come in 1 year, how do you think, Father, for Portuguese Catholics who are trying to reckon the two in their mind, when they see the news on TV of awful crimes and sins of the Church, they see the young people too, and they're trying to, hard thing to comprehend as well.
Right, but to acknowledge, what was done, to repent, to acknowledge the hurt and try to help people to overcome, to be patient with others, maybe even outside of it, just really struggling. I've had, over the years, I've had friends of mine that were really scandalized, but, we keep our eyes on the Lord. We're following Christ. We all know good priests. We've all experienced they're shepherding in our lives, to focus on those things and to be assured. I mean, it is like on top plate in the church and how to deal with this. And Matthew could speak to this, but all the sanctions involved and things.
Sure. Well, this is an opportunity, too, for healing, for reconciliation.
Yes.
Pope Francis is coming. We'll talk a lot more about what that visit looks like. There's a diplomatic side, there's the Catholic side. But this is an opportunity also for Pope Francis to meet with victims, to speak out here in Portugal, to have Peter speak, as he did in Canada last year. I know you covered a lot of the travels of Pope Francis to Canada last year that were focused almost exclusively on the...
And actually, just behind us, and sorry to cut across you, Matthew, we can see a fighter jet from the Portuguese Air Force, and we have the ITA Airways, formerly Alitalia, and we believe that is the plane that Pope
Shepherd
Francis is traveling in at the moment.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Air Pope 1. So
Timing is everything, isn't it?
timing is everything. So
we know that the Holy Father is in our airspace.
There's another fighter jet. I'm sure you can hear that if you're watching on television. And actually, we can see the pictures on our screen. That is the plane now landing, bringing Pope Francis into Lisbon for this visit.
And you weren't kidding when you said that the airport is right next door.
It is right next door, because you probably cannot hear it on television, but we can hear it very loud in our ears when the jets say cross over. So this is a great, exciting moment for the people of Portugal. These images that we're beaming around the world now, of course, will be broadcast on national television here in Portugal. There is a great excitement among the people.
There is, and that's something that's important to note, that here we have the Pope coming to Portugal. There have been 4 popes who've come to Portugal over these years in the modern era. Francis's mission is proclaiming the gospel, but it is also talking to the people of Portugal about the crises that you were just discussing, the sex abuse crisis, but then also to meet these young people, to help them have that encounter with Christ. So there's a lot on Pope Francis's plate. But I think that healing, that reconciliation, that accompaniment is the word that he always uses. That he attaches it to synodality, of traveling together, which is one of the hallmarks of his pontificate. All of that we're going to see over the next few days.
It is going to be such a privilege to be able to bring you all of the coverage live, as we have started to do here on EWTN. Brother John Therese, I know you have to race up to Fatima now to film a report that will broadcast later in the week.
In haste.
In haste.
Yes. but not with anxiety.
And we ask you that you bring all the intentions as well of our EWTN viewers all over the world.
Yeah.
You bring them with you and pray. And congratulations on 10 years as a brother.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you.
What an achievement. Thank you very much, brother, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Fatima. So if you just joined us, you're watching EWTN's live coverage of World Youth Day 2023. That live shot you're seeing now of the ITA Airways plane is after landing, touching down from Rome with the Holy Father on board. Matthew, the last time Pope Francis stood on Portuguese soil, that was 2017?
Yes, it was. For the centenary of the apparitions of Our Lady of Fatima. So an important moment in the history of the apparitions, and the message this time is going to be somewhat similar, where he reflected on the Blessed Mother and the importance of following her as a perfect disciple.
And Matthew, you have covered so many papal trips and papal visits to countries all over the world.
Yeah.
What can we expect? What is the rhythm and routine when the Holy Father lands? What are we going to see happen today?
Well, there are 2 aspects to every papal trip. There is the diplomatic side. So we're going to see today especially his meeting with the president, and then also the prime minister. And then he's going to have a meeting, an encounter with the representatives of civil society, those who are in authority, but also the culture and the arts, because the message that he brings is for everyone in Portugal. And then he will be shifting into sort of World Youth Day mode, where he's going to have those encounters with young people. He's going to Fatima. He'll have the beautiful Stations of the Cross, and then the intensity increases, as they always do with World Youth Days, and really a lot of papal trips. We'll have the vigil, where young people, by the hundreds of thousands, will be camped out here overnight. And then we'll have the final closing Mass, where he will then send them out.
People are always fascinated. They ask me all the time, how does the Pope travel? Does he have his own plane? Is it like Air Force One? But it's normally ITA Airways, which is the national carrier of Italy.
It used to be Alitalia.
It used to be Alitalia, and then they changed it recently. Or it would be the host airline of a country, isn't that right? That would...
typically, I think it was Alitalia, and then now ITA, since there were a lot of changes to Alitalia.
That's another story.
Another story indeed.
But it's wonderful when we see the shots here coming from the helicopter, and we see the flags proudly blowing outside of the window, the papal flag there
That's right.
of the Holy See, and then the Portuguese flag as well.
John Paul II always had a routine when he would come down the stairs, he would kiss the ground of the country he was visiting. As he grew more infirm, and we all watched him getting older, they made it easier for him, so actually they would bring him a little bit of the soil of the country, and he would kiss that when
Really?
he landed. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Pope
a very
Francis-
famous clip when he came to Ireland in '76, I think it was, when he kissed the ground.
Exactly.
Young people of Ireland, I love you as well, he said on that trip, which is kind of in the psyche, the mind of Irish people still to this day.
Yeah, and that great phrase of his, "Be not afraid," which is a message that he carried everywhere. And I think that's a phrase, too, that we need to have for young people. Be not afraid. You were talking earlier about the stresses and really the fear that a lot of young people have. Do I live my faith publicly? Well, John Paul's message was, yes, don't be afraid about that.
Well, as Matthew said, that in a few moments, when the Holy Father disembarks from the plane, he will be meeting the President and Prime Minister of Portugal, and then he will also be meeting one of the main organisers, who is Carlos Moedas. He is the Mayor of Lisbon. Now, a few months ago, we travelled here to Lisbon for EWTN News, and we talked to him about many of the logistical challenges, the costs associated with World Youth Day. It's 150 million euros approximately to host an event like this. Some of it is provided by the church, the rest of it provided by the Portuguese state. But yesterday I had an opportunity to catch up with the mayor to find out how everything has been going so far and get his general instant reaction. Here he is. Mr. Mayor, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Welcome back.
It's good to be
Welcome
back. When we last met, we were anticipating this. We were worried about accommodation. People were complaining about the cost. Some people were looking forward to it. Now the moment has arrived. How is everything going?
It's very well. I think that we are giving an example also to the world that a city like Lisbon is prepared, that we were able to do our job. You know, like just in accommodation for young people, we have 43,000 people that we are really putting in schools. They sleeping there, they're happy. So we found ways, as I told you, to get everyone, not just in Lisbon, but also in municipalities around. And so everybody has to stay. And if not, the Lisbon people, they are open arms to get them and to help everyone.
What has been the most difficult part of arranging something on the scale of this?
You know, it's like we have never done something of this size and scale before. So at the beginning, we didn't really know how to prepare for such a big thing. And my way was like to divide the problem in slices and then start working in every project with a project manager and a coordinator. And we did it. I mean, I think that it was all about preparation, about preparing the procedures, about really getting all these public procurement contracts. And we were able to do it just so much ahead of others, because normally these things, you do it until the last day, and we were able to do it like 1 month before. The new green park that we'll have down to the river will be for the city. It's in a beautiful place that now has this altar with the stage, and it will be green. So it's a new piece of the city that will stay after the Pope leaves. And here in the center, in the downtown of Lisbon, where you will have these images of this amazing, beautiful town.
It's been quite extraordinary for the Catholic Church in Portugal this year. On one hand, that report that was released about the sexual abuse and the terrible crimes of the Church. And on the other hand, you have this incredible event with the youth, the hope for the future. How are those two balancing out in the minds of Portuguese Catholics?
Look, of course, I mean, everything related to any crime, and specific those kind of crimes, are horrible. And I think that it's up to the church, and the church is dealing with that, and there was openness and transparency about what happened, and that's what is important. But now I think the important thing is not about that. Of course, that is very important, and it was dealt by the church. Now it's about the union of everybody around the world, here in Lisbon, getting together and thinking about the future. But of course, all the crimes are horrendous, and those types of crimes are horrendous, and the church is dealing with it all over. I think it's transparent, and I think that it's very good that the church is so transparent about everything that happened, and I think that's a good step to the future. But now I think that in a moment like this, I really want to focus on all these young people together, thinking about climate change, artificial intelligence, what they do want for the future of the world, and not only Catholic, but but also everyone, those that don't believe, those that have different religions, thinking about the future of humanity.
And finally, Mayor, you personally, what are you looking forward to most about World Youth Day?
I think I'm looking forward really being with people from all over the world. I've been walking on the streets, I've been out walking and talking to people, and just to feel that they love my city. And I think that nobody after these will be the same. Like this point in time in Lisbon will be a crucial point in time for the city and for the people. As I met Pope Francis, he told me that after this kind of days, people are not the same.
Wow.
And I think that it will be transformed not just by the spiritual part, but also by this city. And I'm so happy that every foreigner I meet, they say, look, this city is not just beautiful, but the people are beautiful. People really welcome you, and you feel that you belong already to the city. And that's very fulfilling. I want the image of Lisbon to be great, and it's a great city, so we deserve that. We deserve to be, at some point, you know, there will be 500 million households that will see this image of this amazing city, and I'm super proud of that.
That was our discussion with Carlos Moedas, the Mayor of Lisbon, who has been overseeing much of the organising of World Youth Day from the Portuguese government's point of view, overseeing the spending, the organising and so on. If you just joined us, you are watching live pictures there on your screen of this is Lisbon's international airport. Pope Francis has just touched down in the past 10 minutes or so. He was escorted in by Portuguese fighter jets as his ITA Airways plane flew in around a 2-hour journey from Rome. Now, Matthew, we just spoke that he will, of course, be greeted by authorities from the Portuguese government.
Yep.
He'll meet the Prime Minister and the President. In these meetings with Pope Francis on the first day of a papal trip, what happens in these meetings? Are they substantive meetings, or is it simply protocol?
It can be a little bit of both, actually. So he'll be greeted, and then we'll spend a little bit of time with President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa. In this system of government here, you have a president who's more of an honorary figure. He does have some constitutional powers. And then he will later have a probably more substantive meeting with the Prime Minister, Antonio Costa. The two are very different. One is one of the former heads of the Social Democrats here in Portugal, conservative Catholic. The Prime Minister, Antonio Costa, is an ardent socialist. So very different policies from certainly many of the positions of the Catholic Church. So that's likely to be one topic. Now, always with these, you have areas of common ground where you can find that discussion point. There are, of course, disagreements in areas of LGBTQ, on abortion, contraception, and other things. But I think the two of them will have great common ground and a great concern of Pope Francis, and that is Laudato Si, care for the environment. So that there will be those conversations that will happen. Look for Pope Francis's speech today to the authorities of Portugal, the civil authorities and those in culture. In the past, popes have used those for pretty important messages. I think of Pope Benedict XVI when he came here, I think in 2010, and used that as an occasion to give not an admonition, but a warning. Of concern for Portugal, that it was moving towards secularism and relativism, one of the great themes of his pontificate. And we have certainly seen that in this decade since. There has been a real onset of relativism and secularism in Portuguese culture and politics.
So when a pope touches down in a country and they have the ear of the president, the prime minister, and then by virtue of the entire country watching live on television, it's a chance for them to be direct in some of their messages, or sometimes to be more subtle?
More subtle, I think. There's a lot of diplomatic protocols that have to be followed. The conversations will likely again touch on areas of common ground. That's standard. Every pontificate is going to have some disagreements with almost every government around the world. That's certainly the case with the United States, whether it's President Trump or President Biden. So we'll see that today. I doubt that we will have a lot of details about his meeting with Prime Minister Costa. There will likely be a telegram that will follow, and I promise the word serene or cordial will be used.
It was interesting when I interviewed the U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, Joseph Donnelly from Indiana, and I asked him that. Is it difficult in your position to be an ambassador representing the United States at a time when many of the policies of the U.S. government are in direct opposition to the teachings of the Catholic Church? And he said, of course, well, look, we focus on the things we have in common and not the things we don't have in common. But Father Mark, we have to remind people, of course, that the Catholic Church is the Catholic Church, but it also is an independent nation, the Holy See, an independent state. So he's coming as a head of state as well, with a diplomatic sway and power as well. So these are very important on many different levels.
Right. And just the spiritual side of it, I think it's so important. I mean, it's a real meeting, right? They can talk about real issues, and also just symbolic of the role of the gospel, that we have something to say to all levels of society, that the role of the laity is to engage in temporal affairs. You know, Catholics should be in politics. We have a duty to work towards the common good, to transform this world. How do you do that? With gospel values, with the spirit of the Beatitudes. So the Church speaks about morality and requirements of protecting the dignity of the human person to make this place a civilization of love, to try to make it more of a place of heaven than hell. And that's a vital role. I mean, it keeps us from tearing each other apart, right?
Yeah, and one of the messages that we certainly saw this under Pope John Paul II, the ongoing development, and we've seen this with Pope Francis, Pope Benedict, of Catholic social teaching and how it's applied in culture, in the political realm. What does that mean in practical terms? Well, it means that as you're formulating policies, what are the impact of these policies going to be on the dignity of the human person, on the most vulnerable? You know, Pope Francis talks about going to the peripheries. That's one of the keys for him. The forgotten, the vulnerable. And I think that's something that he's always raising. And in a throwaway culture, he talks about a throwaway culture and the various ideologies that are taking place. So I think that's something, too, that he's likely to touch on.
And talk about going to the peripheries. In just a few months, Pope Francis will be making a much longer journey to Mongolia. And at 86 years of age now, when you think 4 years off his 90th birthday, these are very tiring and difficult journeys for the Holy Father to make.
They are. And this is, any journey now for him is one that's going to be tiring. It's why you can see it in the schedule.
It's been pared back a lot, hasn't it, in
Yes,
comparison to other papal visits?
That's right.
And just even thinking now, just reminded of the war in the Ukraine, the Pope has been a strong voice for peace. I mean, it becomes politicized in our country, you know, the political divides step in and stuff, and he can be there independent of that to say, let's say if we can send some ambassadors to work, to kind of foster a peaceful situation.
I think Father raises a very important point about the fact that here is arriving a head of state. The Holy See has diplomatic relations with about 183 countries around the world. I think there are only 13 states or so that it doesn't have any sort of diplomatic relations with.
Many countries say that their embassy to the Holy See is one of their most important diplomatic missions.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Historically and today, the Holy See, as we're seeing, for example, with Pope Francis's involvement in Ukraine, sending Cardinal Matteo Zuppi as his personal representative to try to bring peace to an area. He's considered an honest broker. We saw the same thing with Pope Francis about a decade ago in Syria with its civil war. So there are very important roles that the popes can play in the world of politics, in reality of the sort of the global crises that we have today.
And various nations know that all too well. Switzerland recently, in the last number of years, opened up a new embassy to the Holy See. And you've seen that too, Father Mark, haven't you? The power that the Catholic Church has to influence politics all over the world, to be that voice, maybe when it's not in certain countries that strong. Right. The Vatican can come in, the Holy See, and be that voice.
Right. I think we're making a distinction between the hierarchy of the Church and the laity. I mean, the laity has a secular character. They are to be in the world. They are
about the Catholic Church in Ireland and why it declines so much, and they were saying, well, maybe perhaps it had too much power in the state. I mean, everything had a religious element to it, or the Catholic Church was involved in.
And I think what happens, it gets intertwined.
Yes.
So when people want a new government, they throw out the Church with
yes,
it, right?
Yeah.
If we're too involved, too much in bed with each other.
But the Church, of course, so important, it still has influence. And again, can still be promoting life at every turn. And
it's, like you mentioned, it's like you said, the countries value the diplomatic presence, because as the world gets crazier and the values are just turned upside down and things are more chaotic, even after the French Revolution, after Napoleon, they were looking for the Church to come back in with some strength, I think we're in that situation again,
Yeah. Go ahead.
I remember speaking to the British ambassador to the Holy See, Christopher Trott, and he said to me an interesting point when I asked him, why do countries still have ambassadors to the Holy See? He said, world leaders can speak to people's minds, But spiritual leaders like, for example, Pope Francis can speak to people's hearts in a way that politicians cannot. And that is why it's so important to have that connection and relationship.
Well, there's a famous quote, I think, from Joseph Stalin asking, how many legions, how many divisions does the Pope have? Yeah. He doesn't need them.
Now, we are watching this live picture along with you at home of Pope Francis's touchdown. He has been on the ground now for the past 10 or 15 minutes or so here in Portugal, and we are awaiting the Holy Father to step down from the plane at any moment now. Who is the first person normally that he meets, Matthew?
Typically, it would be, in this case, it would be one of the heads of state, so that would be President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, and a delegation that would be greeting him there in an official capacity. Again, we talk about the fact that there's a key diplomatic aspect to any papal trip to a country. Now, what's interesting is that in 1967, when Pope St. Paul VI came here, he kept his trip very short because at the time there was something of an authoritarian government here, and he didn't want his visit to be used. We'll see the popes willing to go almost anywhere. You know, Pope Francis, Pope John Paul II especially, willing to take those risks of going around the world and to be encountering what would be very problematic governments. In this case, we have the greeting here at the airport by somebody who's a Catholic, President de Sousa. But that's a point that I think is worth making, that to carry your Catholicism into the political realm really matters. It's important to do, as Father was saying.
I always love this beautiful moment. I remember covering the Pope's historic trip to Iraq and seeing the young people coming up with the flowers. It's just always such a beautiful, sweet moment that we're seeing here after he meets the President or Prime Minister. The young Portuguese children will present him with the flowers in the papal colours. Beautiful guard of honour there as well. And if you're just joining us, this is EWTN. You're watching our live coverage of World Youth Day, which kicked off yesterday officially. Some people say, Father Mark, that it doesn't really kick off until the Pope touches down. So we could be watching the second launch of World Youth Day now. It must be such a beautiful moment. Think of those children, and I'm sure they're as nervous as anything, standing there about to greet the Pope. But what a wonderful moment for them.
And they're old enough, I think, that they will remember this forever
for
the rest of their lives. As Pope Francis, you don't have a chance to meet the Pope very often,
yes,
for the average person, especially young people. So this is a very special moment in their lives, but I think it's also a great moment for Portugal.
It's interesting that Pope Francis is using the stairs today. We've seen in previous trips, I think perhaps in Canada as well last year, where they had to use the elevator for the wheelchair. So I've just been told actually by our producer Greg that we may actually see him using the elevator. We'll have to wait and see. At the moment it seems that they will be using the stairs, but I'm sure just inside at the moment everything is, final preparations being put in place and a lot of things to do before the Pope steps down.
Well, with the Pope Francis's decline in overall health, he's 86 as we've noted. He spent some time in the hospital this year. He had pretty significant surgery not that long ago. So with any decline, we saw this also with Pope St. John Paul II, where you make accommodations, but you keep going. And Francis, I think, is very determined to keep going in these global trips.
Because we remember last year he had a scheduled trip to the Democratic Republic of Congo and then to neighbouring countries, South Sudan. That was postponed. Some people thought, well, perhaps maybe because the trip is so far and taxing that it might not happen. Right. It did happen, and the Holy Father went.
Well, that's right. And one of the reasons it happened is, as he himself joked, that he had a bad knee. He was having some problems with his joints. And he's very famously had sciatica for many years. That has gotten worse. But the knee itself gave him severe mobility issues. And what did he do? He improvised. He kept going. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen become one of those hallmarks of Pope Francis over these last years as he's dealt with these health issues.
In Canada as well, flying across the huge landmass that is Canada, from Toronto to Edmonton, up to the very, very top of Canada. That's scheduled too. I think it was one main event a day they scheduled for the Pope, and then smaller events. Whereas I remember in Iraq, the schedule was full from morning until night. So just a very grueling schedule. But here we see now, this is Vatican dignitaries and various personnel and officials
Yes.
with the Holy Father coming off. The journalists have already disembarked from the stairwell at the rear of the plane. So it may be indeed that we're waiting for the Pope to come down the stairs, or he could be using the lift on the other side
So
of the
popes,
plane.
again, because of the diplomatic nature of this, are typically accompanied by members of the Secretariat of State. Most often, the Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, and various other officials, including Archbishop Gallagher, who is the equivalent of a Vatican Foreign Secretary. And then you have other members of what's called the Apostolic Camera, or the papal household, all of them who travel with the Holy Father. And then, of course, you'd have also his own security,
The Swiss Guard.
elements of the Swiss Guard and others. So any papal trip, we were talking earlier about the logistics of organizing a World Youth Day. Well, any papal trip is very similar along those lines, where you have, we'll be covering that with the leaders of the church here. So that's the cardinals, bishops, seminarians, priests, and men and women religious. And I look forward to his comments to them here arriving for World Youth Day, but this is an opportunity for Pope Francis to have that encounter with the leaders, the Catholic leaders in Portugal, and I think his message to them in the face of things like secularism, but especially the report on sexual abuse. So these are things that are milestones to note over the next few days.
I think with all the popes I've done, maybe it is because I'm a priest and religious, but I always find those are very spiritual talks when he talks to the religious, and he's got, they have some real meat to it and insight. Those are always great addresses.
Yeah. And I go back, too, to Pope Benedict's comments here to the civil authorities back in 2010, but also I think that same year when he traveled to England and spoke, I think it was in Westminster Hall, the very place where Thomas More was sentenced to death, and had very important things to say about the contributions of faith to culture and the role that faith has to play in culture, to your point, Father, earlier.
Right. It's almost like the church is like the last house on the block for sanity today. I don't put it too strongly, but I just heard like one of the messages from Fatima. Our Lady told Jacinta that war is a consequence of sin. We hear a lot about chastisements and worried about supernatural chastisement, but there's like a natural consequence of our secularism that it just can be very terrible.
You know what, gentlemen, one thing I'm thinking watching this, I'm so thankful for the weather, that it is not too hot here for the Holy Father, because remember we anticipated really high temperatures here in Lisbon, coming from that heat wave that struck Rome. That made international news, where I think the temperature reached 43 degrees Celsius. Don't ask me what that is in Fahrenheit for our American viewers.
Well, I think in Fahrenheit it's very hot.
Very hot. There's the translation. I'm not a meteorologist, but I'll tell you very hot. But we were anticipating that it could be just as hot perhaps here in Lisbon. Yeah. And for Pope Francis, even short distances, being out in that baking heat of the sun, that would have been very uncomfortable. But thankfully today the weather has been absolutely pleasant, and there's a nice breeze coming in. And they say it may get hotter later in the week, which could be a challenge for Pope Francis, especially on Saturday when he's up in Fatima, out in the sunlight. But so far it's been pleasant.
Yes, and we can note on the schedule many of the events are being held in the evenings. I think of the Stations of the Cross, but I think also especially of the Vigil, and then the closing Mass is early in the morning. So very prudently organized, I think. But also a point that you made earlier, that we recognize Pope Francis's physical limitations, that some of the events have been cut short. This isn't necessarily as packed a schedule as he might have had just a few years ago. Again, being very prudent for the Holy Father, but also giving him that opportunity to sort of husband his strength.
Yes.
So he can bring the most and the most help to those who are here.
Yeah, it's time to recharge the batteries and get ready to go out. And actually, the Mass on Sunday, of course, we'll be covering live. That, for viewers, just to make sure you mark in your mind to watch that live in EWTN, because that is going to be, it always is spectacular, isn't it, at the end of World Youth Day? Yeah. And that's happening in Tejo Park, the other side of the city. That's where we are at the moment.
And usually, I recently watched John Paul's closing Mass at Denver in '93, and it is, they put a lot of emphasis. His themes are really represented there, so it's going to be a very powerful message, and to see the young people. And I'm sure they're going to have some adoration on the vigil, and that's great, to lead the young people in adoration. Leading people to the source. We were talking about in Australia when Pope Benedict did that, and they brought out a kneeler. He knelt and quiet at the stadium. The stadium just felt quiet. It's like, when do you see young people quiet like that? I mean, it was powerful. Because I think we talk about the presence of the Pope, and even though the world in some sense rebels against authority, we want a leader, right? We want to be shepherd. We recognize a need for that to organize us, to lead us. And we can hear the voice of Christ in our shepherds. Jesus in the gospel, he looks with compassion because they were like sheep without a shepherd. We need that. In the sacrament of holy orders, and the bishop is the fullness of holy orders, there's the presence of Christ. There's the presence of the shepherd to his flock. And there's a special, chemistry's nothing, but there's a special thing that happens there when the two come together.
There is an innate longing in us to find the truth.
Right.
And we saw that in spades with Pope St. John Paul II in proclaiming the truth. Pope Francis will be bringing that message of truth. And we live in an era, a culture that is also looking for truth, but what it considers to be true is very different from the truth. And I think that's one of the areas where the message of the popes can be so powerful for a culture and can be really transformative.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to hear what that message is when indeed Pope Francis speaks to the President, Prime Minister and the civil authorities here in Lisbon. You're watching World Youth Day 2023 on EWTN, day 2 of our live coverage. We're going to take a quick break, but we're going to be back in just a few moments as we follow Pope Francis's motorcade and more analysis and coverage from the team here as we come to you live from Eduardo Park, right beside the airport in the heart of Lisbon. See you in a moment.
I've met so many parents who blame themselves when their children wander from God. Can I just say this? Stop. That's ridiculous. Don't do that. God is a pretty good parent, and his first 2 children disobeyed him. It's called free will. So what if your adult child wanders from God? First, pray and fast. It worked for St. Monica. It said that she gave birth to her son, St. Augustine, a second time, spiritually through her tears and prayers. Don't doubt the power of prayer. 2, while it's important to challenge your kids, don't let your relationship become all about that. When you evangelize family members, remember, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Keep loving them. Keep the doors of communication and friendship open. And 3, never lose hope. Even if you don't get to see it happen in this life, remember, God can always get your kids back. Why? Because he loves them even more than you do, and he will never stop working to bring them home.
Now think of how you feel after long hours of deep, uninterrupted rest. Well rested? You have good sleep? You are refreshed, rejuvenated, aren't you? Now, rest is a powerful human experience. Rest after work or rest from worries is refreshing. Rest also happens in the spirit, I tell you. When the joy of the Lord fills your heart, you experience in small ways that heavenly happiness, joy and peace you feel at rest. As St. Augustine says, our hearts find rest in the Lord. So I'm praying you experience rest amidst your daily activities. God love you. God bless you.
And a warm welcome back to Eduardo Park in the heart of beautiful Lisbon, the Portuguese capital, as we bring you EWTN's continuous live coverage of World Youth Day 2023. Officially, it all started yesterday, but today we are just after welcoming Pope Francis as he touched down at Lisbon's International Airport, right next to us here. And if you're just joining us, you're very welcome, no matter where you may be watching in the world. I'm joined by Dr. Matthew Bunsen and Father Mark Mary Christina. Matthew, we were talking about the Pope. We saw him arrive there, about the meetings he is going to have, and now we anticipate in any moment his motorcade will make its way to the presidential palace. And I had a glimpse there of the small white car he has. Another hallmark of Pope Francis. He always opts for the humble minimal mode of transport as well.
Yeah, I remember in 2015 when Pope Francis came to the United States, and
They had a massive limousine or something for him, and he said no.
well, it was a tiny car. As members of the press, we were able to look at it, and it is as small as it seems.
Yeah, they're
I
small
know
cars.
he opts for the Fiat, the small version of the Fiat. But that's Pope Francis. He's sending a message that he is a humble shepherd, and that phrase of his that he wants to have the smell of the sheep. Well, one of the ways you have the smell of the sheep is by eschewing a massive motorcade. Certainly his choice. Future popes may decide to go for different reasons.
Could be security reasons.
Could be
yeah.
security. We have seen Pope Francis use also the famous Pope Mobile.
Yes.
As he processes in some locations. I expect that we'll see something similar here, but we'll have to see, again, his mobility. I think a lot of the decisions will be made sort of at the moment as to how he's feeling and how mobile he is.
And it's always interesting to see what happens to the car itself that he uses in a country. I know in Ireland when he visited 2016 or 18, when he went to Ireland his last...
I believe it was 18, yeah.
18. The small white car, the Fiat that he used, was then donated to a charity in Northern Ireland to use for their charity work as well.
Right.
So it's a pretty neat thing that they have the car that was used for the papal visit. But Father Mark, this is just one of many things that changed under Pope Francis, isn't it? When he became Pope in 2013, It was also, moving from the papal palace into the smaller, more humble apartment
St. Martha's.
in St. Martha's. So just a slightly different tone with Pope Francis with these visits.
I remember in Brazil, he used I think it was a Ford car, Fiesta or something, and we cram into these Ubers here or something like that. But it is part of the spirituality of the laity is to live a simple life, right? And I think he's communicating that. It's kind of funny. Lamborghini, I think, gives him that papal colored Lamborghini. They give it to some charity, I think, but.
He signed the Lamborghini, blessed it, and then they auctioned it off for charity.
So the world's always tempting us, right?
Yes. I mean, that's a good test. Would Father would take the Lamborghini, or would you give it away? It's a tough one.
I mean, obviously, I think we all realize the materialism, the consumerism today is just like off the charts. We got Amazon, all these big companies, corporations, always vying for us to choke out that seed, not be the good soil to receive it, but these cares of the world. So, he's I've heard him described as a dynamic evangelist. I think kind of his method is like, I was reading this in an article that he is one of accompaniment. He's like a fellow journeyman on the way, and I think that's beautiful. His sense of humor in things, and that he's willing to try different things to get the word out there. It's a gift of his.
It's funny when you say the Lamborghini. I mean, it's not a sin to be wealthy and be successful, right? And I remember just 2 weeks ago, I think we aired it last week, I went to New York, to Manhattan, to interview Al Kelly, who was the CEO of Visa Corporation for many years, one of the biggest financial institutions in the world. Now he's the executive chairman, earning tens of millions a year. But he sees his responsibility. He's also a board member of the Mother Cabrini Foundation, the health foundation that gives $150 million to various charities all over the state of New York every year. So being wealthy and successful, having the Lamborghini in it of itself is fine as long as you have that responsibility to give back.
Right.
Your Christian duty.
Right. I always believe that Lazarus in the gospel was something of a man of means, right? And Jesus was friends with them, and we're all called to be detached. It's how do we use that money? I mean, EWTN depends on donations, and wealthy people and normal everyday people. Most donations come from that side of it, but certainly wealthy people contribute greatly to EWTN. So it's needed. It's what we do with it in our detachment.
And isn't it amazing, because of the help of EWTN donors and viewers as well, as you said, ordinary people at home who give what they can, as Mother Angelica used to say, between the electricity and the gas bill.
Right.
If you can remember us, please do. But being here in Lisbon with, as the viewers can see, this setup here with the cameras, we have studios just like this broadcasting in Spanish, German, Polish as well. We have journalists on the papal flight who are covering it too. We have a massive studio set up over at Tejo Park. It's an expensive game, television, to do it properly, to get the coverage done well. So you need the resources to do it and to get the message out there.
I think that is a beautiful aspect here. Right, this isn't cheap. I mean, the stages and altars are elaborate. They put time, money, artistic talent into making it as beautiful as possible, and not skimping on that. I think that's a great message of Catholicism, that You know, we use everything we have to worship the Lord in the most beautiful way. And like our beautiful churches and things, especially in Europe, it's something beautiful the poor can enjoy.
Yes.
They can see great art, architecture, and that lifts us up to God. That's a first step.
But also the work that EWTN does, for example, of bringing this papal trip, the travels of Pope Francis, what he says, his teachings, unedited to
Yes.
the world. His message to the young people is going to be broadcast literally all over the world, and of course on all of our digital platforms, through our affiliates and our very impressive social media presence. So that opportunity then for someone I know because we all get emails and messages from people all over the world, from as far away as Macau and Nigeria and South Africa and even Mongolia. We will hear from people that they were able to follow Pope Francis. Every week, for example, we do his Angelus and his general audiences. So that message of helping Pope Francis to communicate that message, but how do we do it? We do it by all the means of communications.
Yes.
But as you say, it's not an inexpensive venture.
And we know how blessed we are and lucky and grateful for the support, because even with Pope Francis's visit to South Sudan, as we mentioned, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, I went with a cameraman to South Sudan a couple of weeks beforehand to get a sense of what it's like for people on the ground, life on the ground for ordinary people in South Sudan. And, you know, getting to South Sudan, not an easy or cheap task. Getting around in South Sudan safely as well for the crew to be able to capture that footage, capture it in a beautiful professional way, bring it back, edit it, package it, and share it with the world. But it's a great thing we're able to do. What a pleasure and a blessing it is.
Then also to be able to carry and to cover Pope Francis's journeys to those locations. In South Sudan, a war-torn country, the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and elsewhere in these far-flung regions where life can be very difficult, where you have civil strife and war. And Pope Francis is a true apostle of peace.
And the interesting thing as well, of course, covering the papal journey as we are doing now, I know a lot of Catholic outlets do that as well. But for example, when we went to South Sudan beforehand, when we were there with the EWTN microphone and t-shirts, looking around in the middle of the jungle region of Rumbek, we're the only journalists there beforehand. And they're looking at us saying, wow, you came here? You for real? Before this, the entourage and the security that you're afforded with the Pope. So it is great that we're able to go to those places.
Right, but that's one of the things that is so important about these papal journeys. We talk about there's a diplomatic aspect to it, but there's also, for someone like Pope Francis, we've seen this also with other popes, Benedict XVI and John Paul II, that you are going to those corners of the world where a lot of people don't want to look.
Yeah.
You saw a leper colony, I know, a place where no one wants to go. But there are stories there that have to be told, and Pope Francis is shining a light on those parts of the world where you have the forgotten. It's why he always refers to the peripheries, the periferia, as he calls it. But we also, as journalists, then have an obligation to go there as well.
And talk about a biblical connection and that leprosy colony. And yes, there are still leprosy colonies in many parts of the world where the people are shunned, forbidden for living in the towns and villages because they're seen as unsafe, unclean. So we went to this place where there are 5,000 people, women, men, children with leprosy. Today you can see their hands were missing, fingers, feet, toes. And the only place where they're welcomed is at the local Catholic Church. That's right. Who will bring them in. And we'll go collect them and help them because they can't walk there, many of them. The only place they're helping them were Catholic missionaries. I mean, you see that. It is the incredible work of the Catholic Church. And that's just one example. We could talk about it all day here. You have that all over the world.
I was in Ethiopia back in February, and I'm forgetting the name of the town we were in, but it was a kind of a bigger city for them, and they had the Missionaries of Charity. It was in this area of town where they had like a lot of drug addiction. They have this chat addiction, they call it, and you could see all these guys that were kind of strung out on it. But the Missionaries of Charity, they had a compound, and it was like a bit of heaven. They actually had like grass and lawns and trees, and they had like 120 people. They had like a award for unwed mothers and things, and then the mentally disabled, and it literally was. The only way I described it to people was it was like a piece of heaven, in all this suffering and difficulty.
And one person I spoke to in South Sudan about that, the church booming there, young people, and he said, Colum, there are so many problems in South Sudan, the youngest country in the world, and when the government often doesn't have the means or doesn't have the want to help those who are really, really suffering. When people look and they see a nun in a habit or priest with a collar, they see there's help. There's someone who will not pass me by. They also see education, healthcare, empowerment. That's what they told me, and that's why it's booming in places like that.
And the Pope becomes a global representative of exactly what you've just said.
And when you look at now, as we see on the screen here, the Pope's vehicle about to leave the airport and travel through Lisbon, of course, this is a first world country, a wealthy, developed country, but not without its problems as well. We saw some homeless on the street. Thankfully, Lisbon and Portugal, I'm told, doesn't have a huge problem with homelessness like you might have in some cities in the United States at the moment. But still, there are people here with depression problems, I've been told as well, anxiety, and the Pope will speak to them as well, to those people.
Well, and one of the messages of this Pope, of other popes, really of all popes, is that, yes, you may be well-developed, you may be financially well-off, you may not have the same social problems, but you can still suffer from deep, abiding spiritual poverty. And that's one of the warnings, I think, that Pope Francis gave. That's one of the warnings that Pope Benedict gave when he was here during his apostolic visit, about that spiritual poverty.
Remember that great moment when Mother Teresa visited New York City, and she was down in Manhattan and in different places, and then she went up to the Bronx. Now, today, even the Bronx is known as a disadvantaged area, but back then, it was a very dangerous, gang-driven area, and all the reporters were crowded around Mother Teresa and said, Mother Teresa, what do you think, what you've seen here today? What's your reaction? And she said, it is awful. I've never seen such poverty and hardship. People here have nothing. The people down in Manhattan. She was talking about the wealthy people down in Manhattan.
Right.
That spiritual poverty.
Right.
And all the journalists were just flabbergasted. She was talking about the people. It was just a very powerful moment when she made the message you just said, Matthew.
Well, it is possible to suffer from spiritual starvation. And we were talking earlier about the innate longing for the truth, that connection, that relationship.
And you've seen this too, Father Mark, when you've gone to places like Africa and certain parts of Asia, where people seem to have the least. They seem to have such a strong spirit, despite the hardship that they have. There is this strong spirit, the spirit of the African people. We hear that a lot.
Right. We were working. I was there with a group working with some priests for about almost 3 weeks, and one day we went to one of their parishes. They didn't, the people in the area didn't have running water, electricity, beautiful countryside. But yeah, I was struck by the joy. In fact, I mean, I couldn't speak their language, but afterwards we were meeting with the parishioners, and I remember I just got my iPhone out and just started video, and just asking them their name, just for them to tell me their name, and they had the biggest smile. And I was literally I mean, it's kind of cliche, but I was thinking, they have the gift of joy.
Yes.
And an American would look at that and say, you have so little. How do you have this joy? Where is it coming from? But it was just radiating.
I remember going to Mass in Tanzania. And first it was about 2 hours, which...
I went to one in Angola once that was 5.5 hours. And let me tell you, that was a test of my faith. That was
So don't complain about long preaching, right?
But the joy, the music of this Mass, and the reverence, we were talking earlier about the reverence, how quiet everything became. In the midst of this joy, this ebullient joy, sudden reverence, the quiet throughout the Eucharistic prayer was just remarkable. One of the things I will always remember. But to that, in regions where there is that material poverty, we can still see that immense wealth of prayer life and an understanding. It's one of the reasons why I think Africa has become so important to the world and to the church, growing as it is, but to be this voice and clarity in teaching.
And with geopolitical instability now, resource mineral shortages as well, you can see how Africa as well, is such exploitation happening in various African countries as well, as there's a race for more lithium and different materials. And it's always the people who are the lowest, they always suffer the most. And that continues to happen today, which is something Pope Francis keeps calling for again and again, that equality and companies' social responsibility if they are taking resources out of African countries to help the people.
Yeah, Francis uses a very important phrase. It's called ideological colonization, where he talks about the colonialism still exists, but it's an ideological colonialism where too many governments in the West, even NGOs and the United Nations and others, will attach to development and promises of aid.
Work somewhere. We've contacted them. We would love to come and film the work for EWTN, show the world the incredible work you're doing in whatever part of the world. And they say, we just want to do our work quietly, help the people. We're not doing it for glory. We're doing it for the glory of God. It's incredible. All over the world.
Yeah, I saw that in Ethiopia where the diocese, the bishop was very much involved in the distributing all the donations that come in, into Africa. And I remember we were driving by this one place where they were, like a couple times a month, they were giving out bags of grain. And it was from the U.S., and the church was there involved to help distribute it. And so the people were all lined up, and they were going over these big sacks of grain. And one of the priests I was with, he was from the West, and he said, I wouldn't even know what to do with a bag of grain. It's like they were so happy. It's like, we're so have such a different life, and that's a great role of the popes. That just to call us to attention, to be reminded of the developing world. How can developed nations help them, and what can we do?
Well, we want to be fair to these charitable organizations. The Catholic Church has been at this for 2,000 years.
And as I say, they do incredible work as well, and we partner with many of them as well, the Catholic Church does. And I remember last year when we went to Ukraine a few times, while embassies were shutting up and getting out in various groups, we were going in with the Pontifical Mission Society, going in with supplies who had come from the United States, and the Order of Malta. They're just doing incredible work all over the country.
And you mentioned like sisters especially, that's been such a loss. The declining numbers in religious life to run these schools, to run these kind of. Another place in Ethiopia, they had a leper colony there, and they did hospital work and an orphanage and everything, and it was so beautiful. We visited those places, and it's that is such a real loss. I mean, I think that the religious sister especially models just that humble service. The priest is in charge of a parish and got this power and authority, and the beauty of the women religious are there. Their presence alone is powerful, and of course the service of the work. And that's what I felt like being in Africa. I look at the young people and the ones that didn't have like that educational opportunities just to develop themselves. To me, that was one of the saddest things that I felt like I saw, that the loss.
Well, in South Sudan as well, we filmed a report at the first secondary school, we call it in Europe, high school in America, that was just for girls. Normally girls past the age of 10 would never be educated in South Sudan. Catholic Church comes in, a group of Loreto sisters from Dublin, from my neck of the woods, and they opened up the first secondary school in the country just for girls, telling parents, rather than selling them for cows, which is what happens still today in South Sudan, that you let them get an education, get a profession and a job, and it will pay off long term for the family. Because many of these families are so poor, and they just, the daughter is swapped off for cows for marriage, and that's how they survive.
Yeah.
Now, if you just joined us, conscious that people are tuning in all the time, this is Pope Francis, his motorcade, as he makes his way from the airport into the city of Lisbon. You're watching EWTN's live coverage of World Youth Day. This is Colm Flynn here. I'm joined by Dr. Matthew Bunson, Father Mark Mary Christina. We're sitting in a studio in Eduardo Park, right next to the airport, where we had the opening mass yesterday. Beautiful celebration with hundreds of thousands of young people. The place was just packed with people from all over the world. So today we have Pope Francis arriving this morning. He will be here in Lisbon until Sunday, where he will conclude with his final mass, the closing mass of World Youth Day. And I believe, is that the Pope waving out the window, maybe one of his security personnel in the back? We're just squinting to see the monitor here, watching with you, and people coming out to wish him well.
The Holy Father's movement throughout a city is different in some ways. As we've noted, Pope Francis chooses to have a slightly more humble form of transportation. But Pope Francis also historically has been willing to go in parts of cities that are perhaps not as safe as others. I can think of a number of visits that he's done in places like Africa and elsewhere. I think of the Central African Republic, for example, that I think it was Bangui, that was something of a real security risk given many of the political problems that they've had. But again, Pope Francis chooses to go to those places. Portugal, an incredibly safe country. We have been blessed to spend these last days here. But Pope Francis, as we can see, as a head of state, is also receiving all due courtesy and security as he proceeds now to have his brief encounter with the President of Portugal.
It always is, I think, funny to see when the little small white car surrounded by all the black security detail is just a funny contrast, but a beautiful thing to see. With the lovely formation of the motorcycles as well from the Portuguese police in the front. Well, you're watching, as I say, EWTN's live coverage. We are going to take a short break, but we're going to be back in a moment here live from Eduardo Park with our continuous coverage of Pope Francis's visit here to Lisbon across the week and his first day going to meet the President and Prime Minister of the nation. We'll have more right after this.
Look who's stopping by with At Home with Jim and Joy. Next time, Kim Cameron Smith empowers parents to help keep their teenagers rooted in the Catholic faith and identity. At Home with Jim and Joy, here on the Global Catholic Network, EWTN.
When the bells of our humble parish church rang out unexpectedly, we did not know then that God had sent us a saint.
I ask you to consider these two facts: the magnitude of the sufferings which the poor souls in purgatory endure, and second, the means which we have of mitigating these sufferings. Never cease to pray for them.
Get instant access anywhere, anytime to the best in Catholic TV programming with EWTN On Demand.
Hey, don't forget, EWTN's bookmark is now on demand.
Huh?
Hey, Doug, don't forget about our show, Father Spitzer's Universe. It's completely on demand.
From me, you get 2 for 1. Scripture and tradition and EWTN Live.
Hey, remember, you're always at home with us.
Hey, you want to live right? The doctor is in. Anytime, anywhere.
Wait, Life on the Rock is on demand too.
You can take your journey anytime.
And don't forget about all of those grace-filled women.
Right! Hey, no one has more hours of Catholic programming on demand than EWTN. Just go to EWTN.com/on-demand. There's nothing to fill out, no membership required. All you need is an internet connection and you're good to go.
Come on over and bring a friend.
We've got hundreds of shows.
EWTN On Demand. Not only are these programs in demand, the hosts can be pretty demanding too.
Please, watch.
Go to EWTN.com/on-demand or download the free EWTN app and watch on Roku, Apple TV, Google TV, and Amazon Fire TV.
Hello, family. August 15th marks the 42nd anniversary of Mother Angelica flipping the switch and broadcasting the first program on EWTN, the Eternal Word television network. Thanks to you, our EWTN family, Mother's mission continues, the mission to tell the world about Jesus. Your generosity provides you and others with news from around the globe, the daily Mass with the Franciscan missionaries of the Eternal Word, programs that deepen your faith, and documentaries that teach and inspire you. Today, as we prepare to celebrate the 42nd anniversary of our on-air launch, will you make a donation to continue Mother's mission and reach more souls with the gospel message? With your gift, you'll share even more faith-filled TV and radio programs, award-winning news from a Catholic perspective, and online devotional content. Most importantly, with your donation today, you'll tell the world Jesus loves you.
EWTN is 100% viewer supported. Your gift today keeps EWTN on the air and shares the joy of the gospel with the world. Please make a gift by going to EWTN.com/anniversary. You may also call us at 1-800-447-EWTN. or send your donation to EWTN, 5817 Old Leeds Road, Irondale, Alabama, 35210.
One of the most important cities in all of Portugal is a place called Fatima. Fatima is one of the very relatively unknown cities in Portugal until 1917, when 3 children, Jacinta, Francisco, and Lucia, saw the image of our Blessed Mother in a miraculous apparition where she revealed herself as Our Lady of the Rosary. The story of Fatima is one of miraculous healing for many people, especially people who doubt in their faith. But it's also one that talks about how the power of prayer can even bring down the wall and destroy the evils of communism. Most importantly, it's a place where people come.
It is great to have you with us. It is EWTN's coverage of World Youth Day 2023, coming to you live from beautiful sunny Lisbon, the Portuguese capital, one of the oldest cities in Europe and an incredibly beautiful city, it has to be said. I'm joined by Dr. Matthew Bunsen and by Father Mark Mary Christina. We're in Eduardo Park, which is right next to Lisbon Airport, where the Holy Father touched down around 30 minutes ago or so, and now, as you can see on your screen, he is making his way to the presidential palace to meet the President and Prime Minister of Portugal. So they have the road closed off for him in one direction as he heads through the city, heading towards the city centre, and it's a beautiful sight to see here as we bring you these pictures live from the helicopter in the air. Matthew, how many popes have visited Portugal?
Well, in the modern era, 4, in fact. Pope St. Paul VI, who came in 1967 for a brief visit, focused mainly on Fatima. And I know that Fatima is going to be assuming some importance over the next few days, as Pope Francis is heading there. And then we had Pope St. John Paul II, who came here in particular in 1982 on basically the 1-year anniversary of the failed assassination attempt on him in St. Peter's Square. And throughout
the anniversary, 1 year exactly after
essentially a year after the assassination attempt, where he was unable to travel for a year because of the severity of his injuries. But he came to Portugal, in particular, again, to Fatima. Why? To give thanks to the Blessed Mother, because he always felt that her intercession had saved his life, and of course the momentous events of his pontificate that followed. He came back again, I think, in 1991, and then again in 2000 as part of the Jubilee, going once more. I think he sensed that this might be the last time he would be able to go to Fatima. Then we had Pope Benedict XVI, who came in 2010, and then Pope Francis in 2017 on that centenary of Fatima, and now he's back.
And John Paul beautifully put the bullet into the crown of Our Lady. I think it's right in the top.
It is.
Yeah. So he obviously totus tuus. He was a great Marian Pope, wrote beautifully about her, and just an inspiration for us all about how to have a true Christocentric devotion to Our Lady that's healthy and strong.
Yeah. And when you talk about security as well for the Pope, and what Pope John Paul II said, be not afraid, in the literal sense, just a year after the failed assassination attempt, he was putting out a strong statement. As soon as he was well and able enough, he was back out reaching people. And because the security threat would still have been high, of course, for Pope John Paul II then, but he still traveled and he continued.
I was struck by something he said. I read this in George Weigel's biography, but he said he learned to be a person of great trust. And it was here at Częstochowa, he said. You know, that bright mountain, this great Marian shrine, it's the spiritual heart of Poland. And I got to go there back in October, and I'd been to like different, even the Marian shrine in this country, Our Lady Good Help, they just renamed it, I forgot what they call it, Help. But I went there, and you felt the gentle presence of Our Lady. It was a real sweetness, comforting thing. Went to Częstochowa, and I remember I was praying the rosary, and it was a lot of people. It was during the week, you know. But I felt the strength of Our Lady, because they always make these pilgrimages there. You know, he is a bishop there, led pilgrimages, and you think about what the Polish people have suffered in their the partitions and, Nazism and different wars and everything, they needed strength. Right? And she provided it. I mean, you go there, you just have a sense of the strength of the Polish people.
But how striking is it that you attended it in Krakow, the World Youth Day? Mm-hmm. Sure enough, a World Youth Day would eventually be held in Poland. Right. Something would have been unimaginable at the time of his election in 1978.
You're right. I didn't think of that, but yeah, that's beautiful.
And while we're talking about that awful assassination attempt in 1981, the beautiful story that came from that, it was a Turkish man, wasn't it?
Mehmet Ali Akça.
And how the Pope went to visit him in prison, heard his confession. And I believe that in 2005, when Pope John Paul II was gravely ill and passing away, that this man actually wrote from Turkey wishing the Pope well and, praying for his good health.
That's right.
Isn't that incredible?
Well, but it's a demonstration, too, of not just the holiness of John Paul II, but the Christian call to forgiveness, to reconciliation, and the impact that can have. And we were talking earlier about the potential here for Pope Francis in speaking to Portugal about the sexual abuse crisis, but also the spiritual crisis that many in Portugal are feeling, not just in Portugal, though, that many in the West are feeling.
And not an easy thing to do, eh? Easier said than done, to forgive your enemies and to pray for your enemies as well. We're called to pray for our enemies. I mean, Father, again, to come back to that thing, because I'm just conscious viewers might have missed our conversation earlier, but about some of the awful crimes that have happened here in the Catholic Church in Portugal, very much in the media here, because that report was released this year. How are Catholics called to comprehend this and compartmentalize it in their mind when they see such good being done by the Church, as we spoke about across Africa, but then they hear about the terrible crimes and sins that have taken place?
And it should be shocking. It should be shocking to all of us, but the evil that we're capable of. I remember Pope Francis gave one of the most beautiful addresses about the Holocaust when he went to Jerusalem, and he went to the Wailing Wall, I think it was, and he gave this meditation about Adam and Eve in the garden, and after the fall, God goes searching for them, calls out, "Adam, where are you?" is what the Scripture says. And Pope Francis added to that, "And what evil have you done?" It was so eloquent, because he goes on to say, without the mercy of God, without His forgiveness, there's no limit to what we're capable of, right? So, not to ever to excuse evil, we need to fight against it. The Church needs to reform and have its structures in place to protect this from ever happening. But to realize that we're capable of tremendously wicked things. And we need to be healed. We need to get together. I think it's good to have the sharing among the victims, the Pope to meet them, to try to bring some consolation to it. And that's what these last popes have been doing.
And so, Matthew, as we watch now the Pope travel through the streets of Lisbon and the young people cheering on from the side, this could be a moment of healing as well for many Catholics in Portugal and people who are feeling that disappointment and sadness.
That's absolutely right. We have seen in this pontificate, we saw the work begin in particular under John Paul II and then accelerate under Pope Benedict, but then Pope Francis really committed himself from the very beginning of his pontificate to deal effectively with the crisis, with the scourge of clergy sexual abuse. We have seen quite a few reforms of holding those who are guilty accountable, including bishops who have failed in their task as shepherds, either in committing these crimes and sins themselves or in covering up or just being negligent in dealing with it. So Pope Francis, I think, has a track record. But something that Father said, too, is important, and that is that in the Church, we have sinners. We have those who are capable of enormous evil, as we have seen. But the Church is also the place where you can find healing from that. And these reforms, this renewal, there's a great famous phrase from Pope St. Gregory I the Great, Semper Ecclesia Reformanda. The Church is always reforming and always renewing. And part of that is recapturing a sense of the sacred, of the reverent, of the Eucharist, of the sacraments, the sacrament of penance in particular. And Pope Francis, with his legislation, I think, has gone some distance in creating at least the structures for that. And now we have to have the will to commit to it.
For example, we have the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors in place, which does really great work in safeguarding and implementing safeguarding measures and policies across the world. But as, of course, so much done, but always more to do.
And in Ireland, what have you seen? Like the comeback there? Has been a renewal, or?
I think the renewal we're still waiting to see happen. But I know there was so much hurt and pain in the church in Ireland. And when we went there this year to record that piece for St. Patrick's Day about what happened to the Catholic faith in Ireland, it was once called the land of saints and scholars. And now maybe the scholars without the saints, I'm not sure. But with the lack of mass attendance, the abuse crisis, when it hit Europe, it hit Ireland so hard. And it seemed, from someone watching it in the media, it was endless, the stories that were coming out. And recently even stories of Holy Ghost Fathers in Dublin from Blackrock that hit the headlines. And so for young Catholics, of course, so difficult, especially if they're not strong in their faith anyway. And they're hearing these stories and they're not seeing the good of the church, as we talked about. They're not being given the stories of the incredible work that the church does, humanitarian work all over the world. When they look at it, they don't have that strong faith or prayer life. Very difficult for them, you know?
You know, and one thing I've experienced when I was studying in the seminary and and I was still kind of discerning the call of the priesthood, I remember when Mother Angelica was at EWTN, a lot of groups would come and we'd have a lot of priests with those groups. And I got to meet a lot of priests. I grew up in Alabama, not many Catholics. You just kind of knew your pastor, maybe one other guy. But when I met all those priests, I realized I really liked them. They were funny, affable, warm people. So I encourage people. Every priest got quirks, have some rough edges. But there's a lot of goodness out there. I've been always impressed by, priests have different gifts and talents, abilities. And get to know your priest and let them minister to you.
Well, it's funny when I talk to some of my friends who maybe are not practicing Catholics, and they're saying, "Oh, but Colin, why are you practicing Catholic? And I don't believe in the Catholic Church." And then I might tell them a story. "Oh, well, we went to South Africa and we made a program about Sister Ethel Normoyle, a nun who's been there for 50 years and through apartheid and helping the people who just are suffering so much in these townships." And they say, "Oh, well, that's incredible what she does, and that's unique." And I say, "Yeah, she is unique, but she's not unique, actually. You have sisters and priests and brothers like this all over the world doing it in the name of God and in the name of the Catholic Church."
Pope Francis uses the phrase of the unknown saints.
Yes.
Catholics and holy people all over the world who are going about their lives. Someday we may know about them. Carlo Acutis, it's a name that we hear a lot here at World Youth Day, of a young boy who died, who's beatified, who's on his way to canonization, who is a great role model for young people. Sort of the unofficial patron saint in some ways of the internet for social media, because he was sort of a pioneer in that, in building a website about Eucharistic miracles.
But most of these people who do incredible work we will never hear of. They won't make the front of a magazine. They won't be on the TV shows anytime soon. I even look at my own family, who you met yesterday. My uncle James, Father James Flynn, this year he just celebrated 50 years of the priesthood as a Spiritan. And almost 30 of those years were spent in Luanda, in Angola, West Africa, when it was very dangerous to be there. And earlier this year, my aunt, she passed away in Canada. She was a sister of service, Sister Patsy Flynn. They went to, now when you talk about rural parts of Canada, where no one else was going, to educate the people, to help, a lot of prison ministry as well she did. And again, you'll never hear that name. And these are just hundreds of thousands all over the world, quiet people doing incredible saintly work.
Well, and Pope Francis, we're talking about his pontificate. He has been a great practitioner of penitential acts of healing and forgiveness, the call for healing and forgiveness.
And now we see Pope Francis just arriving at the presidential residence here in the middle of Lisbon. You can hear the crowds cheering in the background. Oh, and it looks like they're going to have this outdoors on the street because the weather allows it here in Lisbon. That's one of the, you can never do this in Ireland. I can tell you that. It'd be a washout with rain. That's why we have a beautiful, luscious green country.
The Palacio Nacional of Belém, essentially the residence of the President of Portugal, in this case Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa. the two exchanging greetings. I used the two words earlier, serene and cordial. I think we can describe this as certainly cordial.
And look at that, it's great seeing the Holy Father so happy looking out at all the young people. He's in his element here, isn't he, Father Mark, with all the young people?
Yeah, he has a great quality of being spontaneous. And
Friar, just before he left from Rome, he had a meeting with generations. And one of those themes that we've seen with Pope Francis is the generations need to be bridges to each other. And over the next few days, I think we're going to see that as a theme. He just had the celebration of the third day for the elderly and the grandparents. Well, he is, in many ways, a grandfatherly figure who's come here to World Youth Day. But first we have the diplomatic side. And here is the welcoming of the Holy Father, the supreme head of the Holy See of the Vatican City State, visiting Portugal.
And as the cannons are fired from that battleship on the water, that was the Portuguese national anthem we were hearing.
It's called the Pontifical Anthem that is played for any time that the Holy Father is received in an official capacity, otherwise known as the Marche Pontificale. EWTN's live coverage of the 37th World Youth Day. And today, Wednesday, August the 3rd, Pope Francis has arrived in Lisbon. He is now currently at the Presidential Palace
what we're seeing here, Matthew, this is protocol, and now they will go in behind closed doors and they will have their meeting, of course.
It'll be a brief meeting. There will be an exchange of gifts. One of the gifts that's involved here is a commemorative medal of World Youth Day. Obviously a very fitting occasion to have that, and the primary reason for Pope Francis's visit. But every papal visit involves its own diplomatic protocol that we're seeing here. In this case, a military march. We're seeing elements of what I'm assuming are the Portuguese armed forces in procession. It's a more comfortable way for Pope Francis to see this procession sitting, chatting with the President of the Republic of the country of Portugal, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa.
When do we expect Pope Francis to make his first public address or public announcement?
Well, I think that's coming up very soon, unless there's a surprise here. I think what we really want to circle is the presentation with the speech he's going to be giving in probably an hour or so to the authorities here in Portugal. And that'll be, I believe, at the Cultural Center of Belém. It is also traditional for the Holy Father, we've seen this throughout all of the popes in the modern era, to speak to authorities, the political leaders, but then also, as we were talking earlier, cultural leaders, influencers, so to speak, to use the social media term, those who have an impact on secular culture here. So that's going to be sort of his first major word to the Portuguese people, and then we'll see his meeting at the Apostolic Nunciature, which is the Vatican embassy essentially to Portugal, where he will have an encounter or meeting with Prime Minister Antonio Costa, who's the socialist leader here. I think he's been in power since 2015. And what happens in that meeting is probably going to be subject to a telegram. We'll have some idea of what was spoken. And then he will go from there. It's a fairly short meeting based on the schedule. And then he will have vespers or prayer, evening prayer, with the cardinals, the bishops, priests, seminarians of Portugal here in Lisbon itself. And his words there, I think, are his first major word, his themes for the church in Portugal. So we've been seeing the Vatican flag flying extensively here. Well, there are two bands. There's the gold and the white. And the gold symbolizes traditionally the spiritual power. The white band symbolizes the temporal power. We're seeing displayed here today both of those aspects. And then laying over those is the crossed keys of the papal tiara, a reminder that this is the Pope who is the successor of St. Peter.
And I must mention, as we watch this here on the monitor, beautiful images coming from the air, coming from the ground. Our colleagues at RTP, the host broadcaster here, who we are working with in Portugal, doing a really brilliant job at televising this in a very beautiful way. So our thanks to them as well. Because, it's important we have to get the beauty across of this and just all the angles, and it's no easy feat. And I know over the next few days, Matthew, the Pope will be he'll be hearing young people's confession, I believe that's tomorrow.
That's correct.
He'll be meeting some charity workers, people who work with those who have addiction problems and mental health issues.
I got a classic Francis thing.
Yes,
yeah.
He's choosing to go and meet those people here, affirm them in their work, listen to them. Is it expected as well he's going to meet with the abuse survivors, or are you going to address that?
Well, there has been an assumption for some time that Pope Francis would meet with the survivors. Such an encounter will likely take place, if it does, at the Apostolic Nunciature, which has also been sort of a pattern. It's what he did when he visited the United States. But we'll have to see about confirmation for that. Obviously, this is a very sensitive matter. But I would be surprised if some kind of a meeting with the abuse victims doesn't take place, just in the sense that, as we've been discussing, Pope Francis as a figure of reconciliation, of asking that forgiveness, of helping to bring healing to the victims. I think that's an important gesture. But I think we'll also see various comments from Pope Francis while he's here addressing that issue as well.
And as a matter of fact, Pope Francis will be here where we are tomorrow for the opening ceremony, which will take place on the huge stage behind us. You may hear intermittently in the audio them testing the speakers and loud music coming on. If you're wondering where that's coming from, please do not adjust your set, as they say. That's them testing the audio system here at the park where they had the opening mass yesterday. So Eduardo Park will be the location for the opening
I think if we
ceremony
had energy last night with the opening mass, the welcoming ceremony for Pope Francis tomorrow night is going to be intense.
It is going to be incredible. And I encourage people as well, if you have access to YouTube and Facebook, to go back and watch some of these scenes from last night if you happen to miss them, because it just gives you so much hope and inspiration when you see the sheer amount of people that were here last night. It was really, really beautiful. Lovely shots now we're seeing from a drone over the ancient city of Lisbon, going back with a rich history, a rich Christian tradition and history way back under the Roman Empire. Regained its Christian.
That's correct.
After the 12th century, was it, or something?
That's absolutely right. Well, in the so Christianity arrived very early in the life of the Iberian Peninsula, and was well established in what was called the Roman province of Lusitania. And Christianity was firmly planted here and next door in Spain and Hispania. Was flourishing, and then came the Arab invasions, the Moorish invasions in the 8th century, and it remained under Moorish control for a number of centuries until a very famous word here. Sometimes it's considered an ill-favored word now in some circles, called the Reconquista, in which the Iberian Peninsula essentially was freed from the domination of the Moors. And from that point on, Christianity was re-established in a very firm way. Christianity had continued under the Moorish kingdoms, but from that point on, we can see a very strong Christian presence. Now, that doesn't mean that the church hasn't had issues over the centuries subsequent to that, with various governments that sought to oppress the church, even what we would consider to be a Catholic country. We see that elsewhere. We saw that with the French Revolution in France. We saw that in Mexico, so it's not unheard of. So the relationship between the church and the Portuguese governments have been at times fraught, at times very cordial.
And now we see Pope Francis meeting with the local bishops.
Yeah, I was reading some of the history about it, and I went to that Castle Hill where St. George's Castle is, and they had a Phoenician presence here, 1200 BC.
That's right.
That's pretty old. I mean, the Celtic tribes were here, the Greeks, the Carthaginians, the Romans, the Visigoths, the Moors, and yeah, the Reconquest happened from 711 to 1147, and the Second Crusade liberated the Iberian Peninsula. So,
well, and let's not forget that Portugal was one of the great centers for exploration.
Yes.
Around the world. Vasco da Gama, one prominent figure, is worth mentioning here. And ships set sail from these ports all along the Portuguese coast into what was an unknown...
The final frontier back then,
yes. Exactly.
What journeys of exploration and adventure must have been unbelievable.
Yeah, he sailed around the southern tip of Africa and opened up India, brought back all these spices. You know, you read about that in the history book, and what are these precious spices? You know, it's like cinnamon, cardamom, ginger, pepper, nutmeg, stuff we have on our shelves, anise, clove, turmeric. But the important thing as well for the church is that missionaries joined in on these routes and was able to spread the faith. And, a lot of Portuguese colonies around the world. I mean, how many countries speak Portuguese today?
That's right.
Is it like 10, I think? 10
we think of a place like Brazil. We think of parts of India, Macau, for example. Mm-hmm. These were long-held colonies by Portugal until the 20th century.
Now we see that Pope Francis, the Pope is still remaining where he was, and this is the President who is now entering here.
I was in Brazil for World Youth Day, and I remember at the end that Sunday we went to the state park that overlooked the Atlantic. And I don't know, some reason I look at the Atlantic, I just think of all the European trade and everything, and how the missionaries, accompanied them and just spread the faith, with great generosity, and what an impact, on Western culture, civilization, to spread that. It was powerful.
So yes, that was the President entering the presidential palace after the short greeting outside with the Pope, and now we see Pope Francis in his typical small white car, who is making the slow and short journey inside the presidential palace for his private meeting with the Portuguese president.
And we'll have to see how much of the actual encounter or meeting between the two of them is broadcast. We will certainly have photos and film of the meeting between the two of them.
It's always interesting to see when they release the statement afterwards and they say about what the Pope and the President spoke about, the different themes and the issues. As you said, normally it's cordial and the shared interest of the environment.
That's right. In many ways, the meeting here between Pope Francis and the President is very honorific. It is almost symbolic because of the nature of the way that the government is structured here. As we were talking earlier, the role of President is a somewhat limited one constitutionally. The nitty-gritty, the really political discussion is going to take place later today with Prime Minister Antonio Costa, whose government is in control here. I believe they came to power in 2015 and recently won re-election.
Well, as we mentioned, just to remind you that the meeting is private, so we won't be televising the actual meeting here on EWTN, but we will have reaction to it in a few moments as we watch along with you at home those beautiful images from the air of the Presidential Palace here in Lisbon and Portugal, and we see the flag of the Holy See there waving in the crowd. This is EWTN. You're watching our live coverage of World Youth Day coming to you from Eduardo Park here in Lisbon. We have a quick break to take. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hi, I'm Father Mitch Packwell, and I'll be at the EWTN Family Celebration in Birmingham. I hope to see you there too.
The EWTN Family Celebration, August 25th and 26th in Birmingham, Alabama. Register today at EWTN.com/family celebration. Coming up, World Youth Day 2023 from Lisbon, Portugal. Next on EWTN. Look who's stopping by with At Home with Jim and Joy. Next time, Kim Cameron Smith empowers parents to help keep their teenagers rooted in the Catholic faith and identity. At Home with Jim and Joy, here on the Global Catholic Network, EWTN.
Hello, family. August 15th marks the 42nd anniversary of Mother Angelica flipping the switch and broadcasting the first program on EWTN, the Eternal Word television network. Thanks to you, our EWTN family, Mother's mission continues, the mission to tell the world about Jesus. Your generosity provides you and others with news from around the globe, the daily Mass with the Franciscan missionaries of the Eternal Word, programs that deepen your faith, and documentaries that teach and inspire you. Today, as we prepare to celebrate the 42nd anniversary of our on-air launch, will you make a donation to continue Mother's mission and reach more souls with the gospel message? With your gift, you'll
Welcome back. We are live here in Lisbon, EWTN's coverage of World Youth Day 2023. And it is, if you're just joining us, it has been such a brilliant time here so far. We had the opening Mass last night right here in Eduardo Park with hundreds of thousands of young people. We don't have an official number yet, but when you see the images from the air, it was packed with hundreds of thousands of young people. And as Matthew pointed out earlier in the coverage, traditionally, we know from other World Youth Days, it is the final Mass that sees the greatest swell in numbers. So if last night was anything to go by, we're in for a great week. And we'll have it all live for you, broadcast in lots of different languages here on EWTN. At the moment, we've been covering Pope Francis's arrival to Portugal, and he landed around an hour ago at the airport right beside us. He is in the Presidential Palace at the moment, meeting the President. As we mentioned, this is a private meeting. And we expect them to talk once again, Matthew, about any topics in particular, do you think?
Well, it's hard to say. As we've been discussing that the role of president is somewhat constitutionally limited here, so it's likely that the two of them will have a discussion about the culture, about what's happening at World Youth Day, and some of the pressing issues facing Portugal.
So it's his meeting with the Prime Minister that might be more substantial.
That's exactly right. Prime Minister Costa, that comes later this afternoon. Coming up soon, of course, is his meeting, and he'll be giving a presentation, a speech, to the leaders of the authorities of the government, civil leaders in society, and also the diplomatic corps here in Portugal. That will establish, I think, some of the themes that Pope Francis has in mind for the next few days.
Father, the duty of the Holy Father and the Church to speak out when it is coming to countries like Portugal, or any country for that matter, when often we see the teachings of the Catholic Church can be totally at odds with maybe policies in a country, what the popular trend is. What is the duty of the Church to try and express its view and be heard?
Yeah, it is.
Because it's a very delicate position they're in.
It is. They have to be pastoral, and sometimes we've seen popes speak strongly, like John Paul II would be in some country and really get animated. And remember Central America, he did that. I think it was El Salvador and things. And so, I give him a lot of leeway, because those are very hard decisions, like you said. Plus, you have the Holy Spirit to inspire him. Sometimes you want to encourage what's good there. Sometimes you might want to challenge, have a very strong message. So keep your eye on the common good. What's the most effective way to do that? I think, like in the United States, sometimes when I preach, I focus a lot just like on natural law, because they're not going to listen to what the Bible has to say, right? So you have to make a reasonable case for why we have to protect the least among us, and protect human dignity and things. But as we've been saying, it is such a vital role to give that message.
Well, a good example would be Pope John Paul II and his relationship with his native Poland. When he was elected Pope in 1978, Poland was under the thumb and the part of the Soviet Empire, of the Iron Curtain. And his visits there were prophetic, they were powerful, they were calling for political freedom, for the dignity of the human person. But after the fall of communism, John Paul went back to Poland in the early 1990s. And what was his message? It wasn't what everyone assumed to be a victory lap. He was warning them about what could come with the absence of the communism, and that would be relativism and secularism. And sure enough, that's been one of the great threats in the West. So popes over the decades, over the centuries, have been powerfully prophetic in warning culture. And unfortunately, culture very often doesn't listen to what the popes say, to a great cost.
We see now these live pictures coming to us from inside the presidential palace. Pope Francis signing, I presume, the guest book on his arrival as he is about to go in for his meeting, which we will bring you analysis of that, or what we get from the press release, in around half an hour. But at this stage in our coverage, we're going to take a break for half an hour or so here on EWTN. We will be back continuing with more of Pope Francis's first day in Lisbon for World Youth Day. But for the moment, from myself, from Matthew, from Father Mark, from all the team here in sunny Lisbon, it's goodbye for the moment, and we'll talk to you in around half an hour or so. Thank you for watching.
Due to the nature of the following program, viewer discretion is advised.
Oh my. The meaning of sex.
Well, a guy and a girl.
Meaning of sex? I think there's more than one meaning of sex.
It's to show love.
There's connection.
Have a connection with somebody and show them in a physical way, pleasure.
Deepness.
For a husband and wife to know each other.
Emotion, I think there's...
Procreation.
That's it.
That's what I'm going with.
Physical representation of how you feel about somebody.
There's all kinds of things.
There's got to be some love involved.
I think it's something that's supposed to be shared between two people when they've made that bond. And I grew up in the church, and it's supposed to be after you get married.
And do you think that sex is something that should be shared between people who are only married?
Now that's a tricky one.
He's taking the fifth. He's taking the fifth.
It's supposed to be, but it's not, I guess.
Yes, very much. 100%.
It's very valuable, and that's the most sacred thing that you can give to somebody.
What do you think lust has done to our culture?
I think couples in lust aren't like getting to communicate and talk and stuff. They're just like having sex, and then that's their relationship. So they're basing their relationship on sex.
I mean, I've seen it like just ruin relationships. When it gets like that, you just don't talk about important stuff.
So lust, you don't have to commit. Just do what you want.
And do y'all like the fact that we have a train coming right next to us right now? Welcome back. Here we are in chapter 6, speaking about the language of the body. Now, real quick, if I was to do this, you'd think, all right, what was that? But actually, I've told you something. Without saying any words, I've spoken something with my body. This is what John Paul II is talking about when he says the language of the body. He's meaning that we have the ability to speak with our bodies a language without even using words. But if we can speak truths with our bodies, then we can also speak lies. And we see another example of this in the life of Judas. He betrays his master with a kiss. And his kiss seems to say, I love you, while at the same time in his heart he's saying, I'm betraying you. Now the language of his body was a lie. And Jesus, who saw the truth of this action, not only was it not true, but it was an insult, and it was a sign of his death. Now sometimes we speak with our bodies without really thinking about what we're saying. Let's talk more about this. What does the language of the body really say about the truth of who we are, especially with sexuality in our relationships?
Well, I think a lot of people don't realize the language that the body speaks during sex because people often don't even think about sex. In fact, I think that most young people almost never think about sex, especially young guys almost never, ever think about sex. I mean, wouldn't you high school girls watching this video agree that high school guys rarely think about sex? You're probably shaking your heads right now. Well, if you think about it, they talk about sex, we joke about sex, we laugh about it, maybe dream about it, hope for it, but how often do we actually stop and think about sex? What is sex? The body speaks a language during sex, and it's a language of self-donation. I give myself completely to you. I am yours. And in marriage, sex speaks the truth. I am yours. Now what marriage is a total personal gift of self. Like I could not give myself to Crystalline any more than by becoming her husband. And sex says the same thing. It is a total physical, emotional, spiritual gift of self. And that's why sex outside of marriage is a lie. And you may think, well, that's kind of extreme, but it's not just the Vatican teaching these things. Hollywood is accidentally teaching these things. In fact, there was a movie where a woman slept with a guy, and they weren't married, and afterwards, she said to him, don't you know that when you sleep with someone, your body makes a promise, whether you do or not? And so she knew, she longed, not just to hear the truth from his words, but she wanted to know the truth from his body. I am totally yours. She longed for that truth because, as I see it, truth is the native language of the human heart.
Now, since the body is capable of speaking the truth, it's also capable of lying. So how can you tell if you're speaking the truth with the language of your body? Let's look at adultery. The body is saying, I belong totally to you. I am yours. It's not true. They don't belong to each other. They're doing the same thing as a married couple, but it's a lie spoken with the body. Let's look at hookups. The body is saying, I give myself totally to you, but they're not. In high school, I used to justify it by saying, well, we're in a committed relationship. We're not just hooking up, we love each other. And the thing is, I really thought we did. But if we look at our bodies, we're speaking the language of love. And I would live in fear, is my mom gonna find out? I was ashamed, I was regretful. And when you're dating someone, you don't belong to that person. That's not your husband, and she's not your wife. I know you're attracted and you're committed, but it doesn't mean you belong to them. And the thing is, any more than they belong to two people when they're having an affair, it's really not, they don't belong to each other. It's an affair. And because sex speaks language, it's a total gift of self. Premarital sex, it's a lie spoken with the body. Now you need to learn to speak the truth with your body, and when you do that, and I learned that you avoid so much heartache.
I think we could take also this language of the body and apply it to some different things, some tough topics like pornography, masturbation. What is the language being spoken there? When you look at pornography, it's almost as if she's saying, I'm giving myself to you. But she's not. That's a lie. She's not giving herself to you. She's just exposing herself like millions of other guys who are also having like erotic moments with their laptops at home. This is not a real gift of self. And what I beg of you girls watching this, do not accept, do not justify porn in a relationship with a guy. Because do you really want a husband hooked on porn? Do you want your children one day to find out that their dads are addicted to pornography? And you may be tempted to justify it and say, well, it's not like he's doing it. I mean, I don't want to be a prude. I mean, don't guys just have needs? I mean, I'm afraid he's going to leave me for his magazines. So I don't want to be too strict with this guy. But what's going to happen is he's going to get bored with you, just like he gets bored with the women in the magazines. It doesn't matter how beautiful she is. She could have the most beautiful body on earth. He's bored with her in less than a minute flat. And in your desire to receive his attention and love, you think you have to measure up to this impossibly perfect fantasy. And I think sometimes you think, well, if he likes the women in porn, that I need to become like them. And that way he'll like me too. And girls start wearing pornographic fashions of the Playboy necklaces, Playboy belt and purse and belly button ring and earrings. You just think, well, if he likes this, I'll conform to that so he'll like me. But what she's got to do, instead of going down to that level, raise the bar and demand true love. Now, when it comes to other tough topics of like masturbation, if the language of sex says, I give myself totally to you and life-giving love, masturbation says nothing. It's not a gift of self. There's no love involved. If anything, it just teaches me that I have sexual needs that need to be gratified whenever I have those desires. And like porn, it teaches you to take and to use, not to give or love. I think, if anything, it trains you in lust, because it's like you're looking for an outlet to use. And some people think, well, when I get married, it'll kind of be nice because then I can experience all this stuff for real one day. But marriage is not the fulfillment of porn and masturbation. Masturbation and porn are a distortion of love. And if we want to learn how to love, we need to free ourselves from these vices. The addictions, the attachments we might form to them can be difficult to break. But with Christ's grace, anything is possible.
You're so right that there's many tough topics like this to kind of apply what we're talking about. And one of these is contraception. Contraception is, really often not discussed much, if at all, between couples who are sexually active. Now, what this does is it causes huge problems. Listen to this in a letter to Dear Abby some years ago. It says this: I'm a 23-year-old liberated woman who has been on the birth control pill for 2 years. It's getting pretty expensive, and I think my boyfriend should share half the cost, but I don't know him well enough to discuss money with him. I was speechless when I first read this. Like, she can have sex with him, but she doesn't know him well enough to even discuss money. This is where we've come so far in this culture. We'll get so close to somebody to actually maybe have sex with somebody that we barely know, and then realize we're not close enough to even talk with them about the truth of what's happening in our relationship. But even there's some good and true verbal language. Even if there is some verbal language, the truth is that in order to have love, the language of the body has to be spoken in the sexual act. It needs to be completely true. But in many relationships, that language has become compromised. I mean, if the most intimate moment between spouses is an act that says, I give myself to you, I give all that I have to you, and I receive all that you have and all that you're giving, the act is also saying, I give you all of myself, including my fertility. I receive all of you, including your fertility. But contraception, artificial birth control, makes the language of the body a lie. I won't give you all of me. I'm holding back my fertility. I won't receive all of you. I'm not going to receive your fertility. Now, it's one thing to say that this is a lie, and it's another thing to experience it. So, Crystal, what was your experience with that?
Well, in high school, I was on birth control because of my lifestyle. I felt like I had to be on birth control. And the thing is, my body is saying, I give myself totally to you. But then contraception is saying the opposite. I'm keeping myself from you. I won't give you my fertility. Now, in high school, birth control was so accepted. It seemed like the majority of my friends were on it. It was just another thing. And I felt like I'd wake up in the morning, do my hair, brush my teeth, and take my pill. It was that simple. It's just another thing you do. And I thought, well, it can't be that big of a deal, right? I'm going to liberate myself. I felt like it was my right to be on birth control. But my right to what? To subdue my fertility with chemicals so I could be sexually available? I knew I didn't want to be on it, And I knew it was wrong, but at the same time, I thought I needed to be because of my lifestyle. And a lot of girls were on birth control because, well, their lifestyle. Others were on it because of their acne, because of their skin. And others were on it, well, just in case. And the thing is, birth control, when I look back, it made me sick. And I gained weight, I was depressed, I was grumpy. And for a long while, it really made me sick. And I told my boyfriend this. I don't want to be on this anymore. And he said, oh, well, just try. Just try to hold out. Just try to see if it gets better. It'll get better. Just try it a little longer. So, of course, I did it. And I'm not sitting here trying to blame my boyfriend. He wasn't sitting there putting the pills in my mouth. No, it wasn't his fault. It was my fault. And I look back, and it was so unnecessary. It was so unnecessary that I was a healthy 16-year-old taking drugs to make myself sexually available is such a messed up concept now that I look back at it. And I didn't realize my fertility was a gift and it wasn't some kind of disease.
So we're seeing here that contraception, which seems to promise all of us, and seems to promise us freedom, actually doesn't help us at all. It suppresses our freedom and it sets us up for a future in marriage that's based only on a partial gift of self rather than a total gift of self. And if sex and marriage is supposed to be love-giving and life-giving, then the language of the body here is saying no to both of those parts of sexual love. But remember, the chastity is a big yes to love and the responsibility that comes along with it. So here we are. Check out some insights from some others who've been inspired on John Paul's liberating, truly liberating idea about language of the body.
The actions that we do with our body mean something. And so if I, came up to you and, and I asked you, who ate your breakfast this morning? You wouldn't say, well, body. No, you'd say, I ate my breakfast. And if I was to, do something illegal, it wasn't say, well, look, officer, look, that was just my body doing it. I don't understand what just happened. Like, you're getting the ticket, not your body, and you're going to be paying for that ticket. So, the body speaks a language. It speaks truth, and so it's supposed to speak truth. And so we have to understand what that truth is so that we can live in the truth, and which is what we're created for.
The heart of John Paul II's message is that sex speaks a language. It speaks the language of I give myself to you forever. Not till the end of the night, not till the end of the semester, forever. And that's the language your heart hears. That's how God created you. And when you try to take that language out of that context, when you try to take it out of marriage and make it mean, I'm going to be with you for the whole evening or the whole semester, it winds up hurting. Because you think you're getting close to someone, you're not going to feel alone, you're going to feel less alone, but you feel more alone because it's not what He created it for. He created it to be for forever.
If we're going to look at not only sexuality, if we're going to look at the language of love, it's not about words. Your actions follow your beliefs. It's about what you're willing to do with your body and what you're not willing to do with your body.
Jason right here isn't just this cute guy, this cute body here. And he isn't just the soul that God put in him. He's all of it combined, so that way he can serve our family through his body. His heart that wants to love us gives us hugs and embraces us with his body. And his body is able to speak the language of his heart. But they need to be all together. You can't separate them.
What I do in my body really makes a difference for who I am and what I'm called to. It allows me to live in the grace, or allows me to live in the lie. And so what I do in the body matters. And so what I need to do is I need to understand, how am I supposed to speak the truth with my body?
So, how do we live this out? How do we speak the truth with the language of our bodies and really in all the areas of our life? Well, a major part of that is our mouth. A big part of telling the truth is having the discipline of self-control. If we can speak the truth about what we did last weekend or what a classmate said yesterday, we'll be able to be somebody that others want to be around. Girls, we all know that gossip is something that's difficult for you. It's just an easy temptation. There are plenty of my wife and her friends, who struggle with that and talk about it, letting God be able to just help them to not say every single thing that they want to say about other people. And guys, you think, well, hey, that's not my problem, but really, there's a lot of times where we end up talking about other people or about another girl or what happened last night, and it's not helping anybody. If we could just leave some things unsaid, it would really help us to live truth in all those areas of our lives. So think about that and pray that God can help you to be truthful in all the areas of your life, because we really know that that's going to lead to freedom and lead to true love. We're praying for you. We'll see you in chapter 7.
Coming up, World Youth Day 2023 from Lisbon, Portugal. Next on EWTN.
When the bells of our humble parish church rang out unexpectedly, we did not know then that God had sent us a saint.
I ask you to consider these two facts: the magnitude of the sufferings which the poor souls in purgatory endure, and second, the means which we have of mitigating these sufferings. Never cease to pray for them.
I'm Father Mitch Packwell, and I'll be at the EWTN Family Celebration in Birmingham. I hope to see you there too.
The EWTN Family Celebration, August 25th and 26th in Birmingham, Alabama. Register today at EWTN.com/family celebration.
One of the most important cities in all of Portugal is a place called Fatima. Fatima is one of the very relatively unknown cities in Portugal until 1917, when 3 children, Jacinta, Francisco, and Lucia, saw the image of our Blessed Mother in a miraculous apparition where she revealed herself as Our Lady of the Rosary. The story of Fatima is one of miraculous healing for many people, especially people who doubt in their faith. But it's also one that talks about how the power of prayer can even bring down the wall and destroy the evils of communism. Most importantly, it's a place where people come and pray, learning about the history of the 3 children, the power of simplicity, and how the Blessed Mother has oftentimes appeared to the poor and the humble. When you go to the main square, you will see a beautiful church that was erected in the 1920s. It also is the burial place for the 3 visionaries, Jacinta and Lucia, as well as Francisco. The arms of the colonnade are similar to the colonnade of St. Peter's Basilica and Piazza. There in the main square, you'll also see a big tree, which was at one point a bush where the vision of the Blessed Mother was first seen by the children. In the evenings in Fatima, you'll have the chance to pray with many pilgrims from around the world, the powerful prayer of the Rosary in many different languages, which ends with a beautiful candlelight procession. Fatima is known as a place where people are truly spiritually fed and where you can continue to keep savoring your faith.
Steve, how do you handle the inevitable personal attacks? You're trying to debate the issues with somebody and they're calling you names and insulting you.
Like I'm a misogynist? Well, I tell these people that I just won't respond to personal attacks. I say, if you'd actually like to debate the real issues related to abortion, I'd love to discuss them with you, and I promise not to attack you personally. But if your best defense of abortion is simply to attack me personally, then I suspect you really have no legitimate arguments to make. And then I usually say, next question.
Welcome to the city that Portugal was named after, Porto. Both sides of the city along the Douro River offer some very unique and beautiful perspectives for tourists, but especially for pilgrims. In Porto, you have a combination of different cultures coming together as one, since it is actually a major port city. But the one part of Portugal that kept the city thriving was our Catholic faith, evidenced by the beauty of the churches in Porto. You can't go to Porto and not see this beautiful Gothic and Romanesque cathedral. This magnificent structure offers so many beautiful interior and exterior views of the city and the faith of the people. Not to be missed is a church dedicated to St. Francis of Assisi. When you climb the stairs, you can either go into a museum area or actually go into the church itself, which has an incredible demonstration of Baroque architecture, and it's gilded with over 650 pounds of gold. And another important spot, which is actually the highest point in Porto, is a stop at a church that has what is known as the Clerics Tower as well. It is there that many clerics were actually hanged to death as martyrs for their faith. And one of the most famous cuisine is a multi-meat stack sandwich called Fransiskus, which is covered with a beautiful cheese as well as a sauce made with a combination of their very famous port wine, local beer, and several other things that make it a delicious remembrance of an incredibly vibrant as well as faithful city. And when you are visiting this city of Porto, you'll get a chance to taste and see the goodness of the Lord, and it will help you keep savoring your faith.
On this morning, all across the United States, coast to coast and border to border, more than 6,000 Catholic schools will open their doors to teach the truth of the gospel message of Jesus Christ.
Good morning, good morning. Today I offer up a
fever. You are in need of blood.
Okay.
Molly is the donor.
Mary was found to be with child from whom, of course? Randy? The Holy Spirit.
The mission is simple and uncomplicated: to teach what is good, beautiful, honorable.
Well, I would say to do what I think touched my heart, say the rosary. At least begin that conversation with Mary, Mother of Jesus, but the most beautiful way to talk to her, of course, is to say the Rosary, because when you're saying the Rosary to her, then you're talking to her, and she's there with you, and she will help you. And then, of course, get into a relationship with Jesus, a friendship with Jesus. I tell the children at school, or tell the young people that I met on the streets around Los Angeles, talk to Jesus. Reach out to him, put your hand in his hand, put your life under his care. Get into that friendship with Jesus, and he will guide you and lead you every step of the way. And of course, you can do that by just talking to him every day, reading maybe a couple of lines of the scriptures, and of course going to Mass on Sunday, and more if you can. But there's no better way really to allow yourself, to open yourself up to the call and the guidance of Jesus, and he will lead you where he wants you to be.
For more information on the priesthood or religious life, log on to ewtn.com/religiouslife.
Who needs religion anymore? Today, for the first time in history, the religious debate has shifted from which God should we worship to why bother worshiping anything. On one hand, you have people who are spiritual but not religious. People who are aware that we probably have a soul and that all this probably came from somewhere, but who don't feel any obligation to act on that probably. For the record, Satan was spiritual but not religious. Spiritual but not religious folks often substitute the universe for God, though they attribute personal characteristics like the ability to know and bless to this universe of theirs. On the other hand, there's a new movement of religious but not spiritual people. They appropriate some of the stuff of religion without God. Harvard recently hired an atheist chaplain. Disturbingly, all the other chaplains at Harvard voted him to be president of the Harvard chaplains. And he wrote a book called Good Without God. But the question is, are we? Gen Z is the least religious, least believing generation in history. Studies also show they're the most depressed, self-loathing, anxiety-ridden generation on Earth. 2016, the first year Gen Z entered college, is also the first time that over 50% of incoming freshmen self-reported that they felt below average in mental health. While there might be many reasons for that struggle with mental health, including someone's basic biology, when we're talking about over half, something else is going wrong. The stuff of faith unlocks answers to our fundamental questions about meaning, purpose, and what happens when we die. Look, we can tell kids who think there's no answer to those questions, or who think that they're cosmic accidents, to spread positivity. Believe in yourself. You can accomplish anything, until we're blue in the face. But they'll still be left with that gnawing question, why? Why anything? So, who needs religion anymore? Call me old-fashioned, but apparently, everybody does.
Steve, how do you handle the inevitable personal attacks? You're trying to debate the issues with somebody and they're calling you names and insulting you.
Like I'm a misogynist? Well, I tell these people that I just won't respond to personal attacks. I say, if you'd actually like to debate the real issues related to abortion, I'd love to discuss them with you, and I promise not to attack you personally. But if your best defense of abortion is simply to attack me personally, then I suspect you really have no legitimate arguments to make. And then I usually say, next question.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
And a very warm welcome back to Lisbon in Portugal for our continuous coverage of EWTN's World Youth Day 2013. We are coming to you live, as I said, from the Portuguese capital. We are here all this week covering all the main events, concluding with the final Mass on Sunday. If you missed it yesterday, here in Eduardo Park, where we are broadcasting to you from at the moment, we had the opening Mass last night with hundreds of thousands of young people from right across the globe. It was really a beautiful thing to see, and if you missed that, you can go to the EWTN YouTube account and you can watch it back. And also, for a list of everything that's happening across this week on EWTN and how to tune in, go to EWTN.com/WYD. Stands for World Youth Day. I'm joined here in our studio by Dr. Matthew Bunsen, the Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News, and of course Father Mark Mary Christina, part of the Franciscan Missionaries of the Eternal Word. Great to have you both again.
Great to be with you.
Matthew, this morning we watched live with our viewers as Pope Francis arrived at the airport just next to us here in Eduardo Park. We saw the plane. If you missed it, we were on air live chatting away saying, well, the Pope should be due any moment now. And then we heard the thunder of jet engines behind us. And just as we looked behind us, we saw 2 fighter jets from the Portuguese Air Force and then the Italian ITA Airways plane with Pope Francis on board, just flying right overhead, down low. It was spectacular. And then we watched on the monitor as he landed at the airport. He came out, he went to the presidential palace. He has met the president.
He has.
He signed the guest book, and I know you have a translation of what he
did,
wrote there.
actually. So, as is custom, as a visitor to the presidential palace, the Palacio Nacional here at Belém in Lisbon, the Holy Father inscribed a message, and he wrote in Portuguese, "As a pilgrim of hope in Portugal, I pray and hope that this country, with a young heart, will continue to follow the path towards the horizons of fraternity. Lisbon, city of encounter, inspire collaborative ways of facing major issues in Europe and the world." So that's an unofficial translation. I'm sure we will get a more formal one from the Sala Stampa in due course. But it's interesting in the way that he packs into this one little sentence, 2 sentences, some of the key themes of his pontificate, especially fraternity.
Horizon of fraternity. Can you just expand on that, or maybe explore that?
Maybe.
10 points.
I need another coffee.
I handed it to Mark.
Horizons of fraternity.
Horizon of fraternity. Viewers, answers on the back of a postcard and send them to us. Horizons of fraternity.
Horizons of fraternity. Pope Francis, he has made a number of trips over the years to different locations, in particular in the Middle East. He signed a document on fraternity. One of his most recent works, his encyclical on Fratelli Tutti, on brotherhood, on international brotherhood, on the idea of fraternity as bringing everyone together. And for him, it's finding those avenues of dialogue, of having those fraternal conversations, part of what he calls this culture of encounter. So when he talks about horizons of fraternity, he's talking about finding ways to communicate, to find peace, to dialogue. It's an aspect, too, of interreligious dialogue, because he stressed that in his pontificate as well.
Reaching out to the other, as he spoke about before that historic trip to Iraq. Not being fearful of the other because you're unaware of them, or, just going there, meeting them, and then building that fraternity. It's a beautiful, beautiful message.
One aspect, too, about fraternity with Pope Francis is it does have, as I was just mentioning, a very important element of interreligious dialogue, in the sense that the more that we get to know each other as religions in the world, the better there is for hope for peace and understanding. And that's a message that he has delivered in places like Al-Azhar and the university and Egypt. He's done this in various other locations, including Morocco and in Iraq, when he met with the Grand Imam al-Sistani, one of the heads of the Shia.
And that was an incredible moment for the whole, not just the country of Iraq, but the whole region, the whole faith of Islam as well, to see that encounter between the two of them.
That's right. So for Francis, it has a number of dimensions, but then he also had the idea of fraternity emerging out of the COVID pandemic, of how the world seemed to have come to an abrupt stop, and the possibilities of using this reset that has been used somewhat ominously to establish those ways of dialogue.
Just to remind our viewers as well that we are coming live from Eduardo Park at the moment, but you can see in the left of your screen there are live pictures coming to us from a helicopter overhead as Pope Francis has left the Papal Palace, and we believe he is on the way to the cultural centre now to meet some cultural leaders and influencers, as you said earlier, Matthew. And we can see the young people there smiling and dancing along as they're following the very slow-moving papal convoy. And it's just been great to see. If you missed the coverage yesterday, we played some of the young people who have come from literally every corner of the globe. When we hit the streets, just in one short hour alone, when we went out with the EWTN cameras, we met people from Brazil, we met people from Singapore, from Togo, from Angola. There was someone in the piece. We had people from all over Europe. I mean, South Korea as well. It was just incredible, Father Matthew, isn't it?
And I heard that I think the United States has 29,000 registrants, right?
80,000 are meant to have come from Spain, and I met 2 French pilgrims last night, and they said 40,000 have come from France alone.
Yeah.
That's right. And around 30,000 from the U.S. And what's been interesting is we've been able to cover this, that so many of these youths from Spain and elsewhere have been gathering over the last few days, and there'll be one, I believe, tomorrow in the park, actually tonight, of all of the U.S. kids who will be also having an encounter in a park here.
That's something I didn't realize about World Youth Day, that various nationalities, they kind of have their little gatherings, or, you know, all the French might meet one night somewhere, the Germans somewhere else, and the Americans.
I understand that the Poles, all of the Polish pilgrims met with the Polish bishops who were here, as many who were here. The Spanish met. In fact, there were some beautiful images of the Spanish gatherings, right at sunset, to the Spanish flag. The Spanish presence is very palpable here. As I was walking through the streets here, the Spanish flags are everywhere, as one would expect. It's a neighbor. But also the enthusiasm of the Spanish kids has been infectious. And then we'll have a gathering of the U.S. kids, but that's just part of some of the options of things that the kids can do here.
That's tonight, right, the U.S.?
Yes,
it is. I think Bishop Barron's one of the speakers there.
He is.
I heard he was giving 5 talks, right? And he was stressing he was going to be evangelizing strongly in those talks. But, you know, I was reading about some of the things the young people are doing today, like at the City of Joy. They're going to have chapels set up that have adoration. I mean, just in churches. That's the great thing about having it in Europe. You know, there's so many churches in these communities.
Turn a corner and there's a church.
Right. And there's usually a significant history, beautiful churches, you know, more beautiful than we have in the U.S., so they can have adoration there. It's powerful at night. See the young people in there praying. There's a vocational fair where different religious orders and, I guess, priests, diocesan priests and maybe lay movements as well can set up, and people can go to the different booths and learn something about different vocations. They're going to have one-on-one sessions, like religious, I think especially in priests there, to talk to young people, to help guide them and discern. And there's a forgiveness park, these confessionals are set up that the priests can hear confessions, and various talks and testimonies. Our testimonies are always powerful, especially from their fellow youth. That's real convicting.
Beautiful to see images there as we're talking. I was keeping an eye on the monitor in the studio, and there was a nice close-up shot of Pope Francis smiling and waving out of the window, greeting all the pilgrims as he went by. And it was interesting, Father Mark, when you mentioned there about going into the beautiful churches, and like in Rome, you know, Lisbon kind of reminds me of Rome a bit, and every corner you turn, a beautiful ancient church. And yesterday we were walking down near a park, and there was sisters on the street inviting people into adoration. But they weren't inviting just the pilgrims. They were inviting, because of course there are lots of tourists here who didn't even know World Youth Day was happening, and they were surprised by this. And we went inside, and earlier when we talked about that question of many young people who are maybe not Catholic or not in their faith, how do I even pray? And they can be intimidated by, I don't know the prayers by heart. I see people kneeling down. It seems very devout. How can I fit into that? And it was amazing inside, because yes, you had some pilgrims on their knees up in front of the Blessed Sacrament, but then you had others just kind of standing at the back who'd been brought in by the sisters, standing for a few moments, lighting a candle. So all different levels.
And what's beautiful, I know they've done in the past, like maybe different movements will be given, they'll be stationed at one church or a religious community. And like the CFRs, I remember in Germany had one, and I remember the Missionaries of Charity would be leading holy hours at night. They bring their own charism, you know, the music and what they're doing there might be a lot of confessional work or talks or something. Dominicans always giving talks, right? So, I mean, I love an expression, especially in Europe with these churches. communities there to share their charism, to let the charism work. You know, it's an opportunity for them to exercise that charism to build up the church.
And there was the Vocations Festival where you were able to have those encounters with different religious communities. I know that we've been covering that with some excitement on our social media.
Let's explore this a bit if we can, because coming out of World Youth Day, of course, you have...
You're smiling.
I'm smiling. What occasion, of course, one can only smile. But we have the encounter with young people all over the world, the encounter with Pope Francis. But World Youth Day has traditionally been a laboratory for vocations coming out of it, and also love is in the air as well, because you have a lot of young Catholic men and women who are trying to find a spouse, you know, someone who's in the faith as well. It can be difficult back where they're from, and they come here, and you have a lot of people meeting that lead to great marriages from World Youth Day. How many stories do you hear? We met at World Youth Day, we were both there, you know?
Yeah, I would imagine it happens. I mean, I hear that complaint all the time back home. It's like they can't meet. They want to find someone desperately.
Yes.
And now you've got a sampling of the whole world. You should be able to find somebody.
But imagine that you travel all the way to Lisbon from the United States or Asia, and you meet your future spouse. I mean, there's a beauty to that.
There's a magic to it.
Exactly. But it isn't something that is just forced. It's something that happens in the intensity of this moment. But that's why we go back, for example, we've mentioned a few times already the legendary 1993 World Youth Day in Denver, where you had almost what they call the John Paul II generation of priests. So many young men found their vocation, the call to the priesthood at that event. And I suspect that every World Youth Day has those stories.
I think Bishop Connolly received his call.
I think he did.
Yeah, he was up front. He was helping a disabled friend of his, and he was in a wheelchair. He was up front, close to the stage, and he made eye contact with John Paul II and felt this call.
Wow. So if you're watching at home, and if you were at a previous World Youth Day and you met your spouse, or perhaps you now are in a religious life, you have to get in touch with EWTN and let us know and the story behind it. But it's going to be so fascinating to see how it progresses across the week. And as you were saying, that normally the first day is the quiet, small crowd. Right. Because young people, sometimes if they have college or something, or they can't afford to come for so many nights. So I saw some of the statistics. The organizers commissioned a study, and it showed that most of the people arrive today when the group come in, and then there's another spike before the final mass. So some people maybe just come for the weekend, especially from neighboring countries like Spain and so on. So if we had hundreds of thousands last night here in Eduardo Park, what must it be like now, maybe for the rest of the week and Sunday? It's going to be amazing.
It will. Yeah, it's just a building momentum, excitement that's happening. And I was participating as a participant in Toronto, and we would go to different parishes for the catechesis by the bishops, and it was powerful. You know, I had studied some theology by that point, and I was moved, inspired by what they were saying. And so we don't want to... I love all the elements that are here. You got, the Eucharist, you got confession, you got proclamation of the gospel, you got the presence of the hierarchy here, you got women religious, you have the married dimension, in these last two. So there's a lot of stuff here to help bring about encounter or conversion, however you want to say it.
What's interesting, too, is that some of the statistics, the details that they found, the demographics, so to speak, 60%, I believe, this is their first World Youth Day.
Oh, wow.
Which I look at it from the other way, though, that 40% have been to another World Youth Day.
So what's bringing them back? That they're coming for more.
Exactly.
That is amazing.
So, I mean, this is what, your eighth? Is that right?
Right. Father Mark has been to 800 World Youth Days, so he's a veteran. And just to point out to you at home as well, if you're hearing some of the noise in the background, I've been told to remind you that they're rehearsing at the moment for the opening ceremony, which will take place here in Eduardo Park tomorrow, which of course will broadcast live and in full here on EWTN. So if you hear them checking the microphones, and they're choreographing at the moment down there. I know you can't see it on camera, but there are maybe a couple of hundred of young people with flags from all different nations who are practicing the procession they're going to do up and down for the opening ceremony, which will be attended by Pope Francis.
And then comes Saturday, we change locations.
Yes. On Saturday, this is going to be a momentous effort by the crew here, because we have to move everything that we have here in Eduardo Park, which is 4 studios filled with lights and cameras and crew and TV vans, to the other side of the city, to Tejo Park, where the Pope will have his final Mass, so that all has to be done throughout the night by the crew. We sign off air here, all overnight they'll work non-stop to move all this equipment over there with a police escort to get it all over safely and set up so you at home can enjoy it on Sunday.
Well, we've been blessed by the weather. It's been great the last few days. But Father, we were talking earlier about the weather, and the reason I ask is seemingly a mundane thing. You were in Madrid, I believe, right? So the storm that happened on the vigil.
Right.
Talk about that.
That was powerful. I remember because we just had these horrific tornadoes in Alabama. I think it was like close to 280 people were killed, like an F5 blew through there. And so it was this very hot day, very dry, very dusty. You know, they had the big walk out to the field where the vigil closing Mass is going to be. And we saw in the distance these rain clouds coming, and it was a big relief. You know, I just kind of forgot about it. You know, the hours passed, and then at night, it finally got to us. I mean, it just hit all of a sudden, and we were like on the third or fourth level of the scaffolding that was basically, you know, had all this backing to it. It acted like a sail, and it was like pushing. And I'm just like thinking tornado, and then plus you have all the speakers in the crowd, you know, up on aluminum scaffolding, just waiting for a lightning strike. And Pope Benedict had started his address, and he was like halfway through it. And so the rains hit, and I never forget, he quit talking, you know, and he just stood there kind of in silence. I think somebody held an umbrella over him. But he said later he didn't think it was right that the shepherd should leave the flock, you know, at this. Because I was worried. How do you can't evacuate all these people? Yes. And you know what's going to happen? But he was present there, and I remember for me it was really encouraging because this is like really smart guy, right? He knows he knows what to do or whatever, but he's just going to ride it out with us,
right?
And that is beautiful.
Well, I think Pope Benedict though was ready for whatever might happen, and it's a lesson for us too, to be ready for whatever might happen.
Isn't it important, the point you were making earlier, Father Mark, about the importance of the shepherd, that the young people are looking to him? I mean, they'll take the cue from him. Right. So if he said, this is over, this is too wet, and this is that, you know, that would be kind of the evening would be cancelled. But that image of kind of sustaining, seeing it through, because it's like life. Life isn't always a sunny day. Right. You have the rainy days, the damp days, you have the terrible, stormy, destructive days. And it's like those powerful moments in the church, Pope Francis with his Orbit et Orbi during the pandemic, walking in silence up St. Peter's on his own. I mean, that was televised all over the world. It was so powerful, yet no people there, but just the powerful symbolism.
And I think, again, we're all hungry for leadership and proper authority and things. I remember being at a youth conference. It was like 1,200 young people, and the local bishop had just gotten back. He flew back from Rome. He was exhausted. He was there like the next day, and he looked completely wiped out, no energy. And he came in there, and the young kids just responded to him so powerfully.
And just as we're speaking, there have the music behind us for the rehearsals, but also on your screen you can see these live images coming to you from the Cultural Centre here in Lisbon in Portugal. And this is Pope Francis, who is just taken to the stage now. The audience are applauding, and he is going to have a meeting now with cultural leaders. I'm not sure if we're going to have an audio feed of it or not, but this is live pictures now coming from Lisbon's Cultural Centre. You can see the symbol of the Vatican, the Holy See on one side, and the city of Lisbon on the other. Again, for viewers who are just joining us, this is EWTN's coverage of World Youth Day. The Pope has arrived today. We're broadcasting from a studio at Eduardo Park where they're rehearsing for tomorrow's opening ceremony behind us, which is why you may be hearing some pumping music coming in behind us. Okay, I'm being told that once the Pope starts to speak, we will have an English translation to feed to you. But these are the live pictures as we're getting them here in Portugal.
West. What is certain is that Lisbon is the most westerly capital of continental Europe, and thus speaks to us of the need to open ever broader paths of encounter. Portugal is already doing this, above all with countries of other continents that share the same language. It is my hope that World Youth Day may be for the old continent. He's making a joke that we can call it the elderly continent. It is my hope that World Youth Day may be for the old continent an impulse towards universal openness, that it might become younger. For the world needs Europe, the true Europe. It needs Europe's role as a bridge and peacemaker in its eastern part. In this way, Europe will be able to make its own specific contribution in the international arena based on the ability it showed in the last century in the aftermath of the world wars to achieve reconciliation and to realize the vision of former enemies who joined together to work for a better future. That goal was attained by initiating processes of dialogue and inclusion and by developing a diplomacy of peace aimed at settling conflicts and lessening tensions, attentive to the slightest signals of dissension and reading between the most crooked lines. We are sailing amid storms on the ocean of history, and we sense the need for courageous courses of peace. With deep love for Europe and in the spirit of dialogue that distinguishes this continent, we might ask her, where are you sailing if you are not showing the world paths of peace, creative ways for bringing an end to the war in Ukraine, to the many other conflicts causing so much bloodshed? Or to widen the scope, we might ask West, Europe, on what course are you sailing? Your technologies, which have brought progress and globalized the world, are not in and of themselves sufficient, much less your highly sophisticated weapons, which do not represent investments for the future, but a depletion of its authentic human capital, that of education, health, the welfare state, and personal comfort, whereas the future calls for reversing the fall in the birth rate and the weakening of the will to live. A healthy politics can accomplish a lot in this regard. It can be a
palace about the horizons of fraternity. Well, he kind of lays out in his speech his vision for that horizon for fraternity here in Lisbon for Portugal, but he goes beyond that, especially speaking directly to Europe. I'm struck too by the fact that there are key elements throughout this of Catholic social teaching. He actually uses one of the key words of solidarity, of the pursuit of the common good, of human dignity throughout this. He has a strong expression of concern for the demographic collapse of Europe, where he talks about the declining populations, of the throwaway culture, another one of his themes, of the unborn and the elderly. And then he hits also on that theme of the importance of that intergenerational connection. So many of the themes I think that he laid out here we've seen before, and I look forward to seeing how he weaves this into the speeches to come.
Father Mark, I liked how he weaved that tapestry together of Lisbon and Portugal being on the ocean, being a country that has always gone out to the frontiers and explored. As he mentioned, people used to think this was the edge of the world. Right. And they went, and he talked about that, Europe still having that feeling of going out and connecting with other people, and borders, he said, are not a place of conflict, but a place of connection. Mm-hmm. Not a place to stop people, but a place to connect.
Right, right. Yeah, and just a question. He said, obviously known for the shipping here, and it's the most Western European major city, I guess, and it has to say, where are you sailing? Right, we have a great shipping industry. Where are we going with it? What's the direction? I think that's where the church comes in, right? To proclaim the gospel of charity, of fraternity. Are we building solidarity among nations? And yeah, that wisdom. I love what he often speaks about this and at other World Youth Days about this forging these bonds with the elderly, with those who've come before us or relatives, grandparents, because they have a tradition and a wisdom that the youth need to be guided with, right? And I think that's what we're talking about, that technology alone can't save us. You know, it needs to be, you know, sin needs to be overcome, or nothing's going to come out of it that goes good. You know, we need that conversion. Our older people have a definite role in all of this.
Yes,
Go
Matthew.
ahead, please.
I'm struck as well with that maritime theme as well, when, to your point as well, Father Mark, he was saying, aim the storms on the ocean of history, and we sense the need for courageous courses of peace. And he talked about the sea of young people here as well that have swelled in the city. But then the construction, he suggested at the end then 3 construction sites. One, fraternity, the environment as well was mentioned.
Yeah, the environment, the future, and then fraternity.
And fraternity.
So it went to your point, his reference to the sea. He actually, throughout this, he quotes almost entirely Portuguese writers and poets, including the 16th century Vaz de Camões, where he uses that great line, here where the land finishes and the sea begins.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the points he's making is this building together, but in a Europe, he says, we are witnessing a troubling decline in the demographic curve. But he says the future calls for reversing the fall in the birth rate and the weakening of the will to live, that spiritual poverty that we've been talking about several times this morning.
Yeah, and you know, I was struck too about, you know, we're witnessing populism, conspiracy theories, but World Youth Days, it represents a chance to build together, revives our desire to accomplish something new and different. And I think we all feel that. Like, our politics, the United States, is so paralyzed, so divided. I know we agree upon more than what is being shown, you know, that it's almost like everything becomes political, so everything seems to be this ground we need to hold on to. But we have to, he exhorts us to find real solutions together. And I think, you know, the gospel does that, right? It has a way of overturning categories of the world that we can fall into in an unhealthy way. And I mean, you know, you have to stand up for what you believe in and promote the good. But, you know, if we can't work together to achieve some common good, it's a horrible place to be in.
He had the joke where in his speech he talks about the old continent, but then he